'Cause ever since I left the city, you got a reputation for yourself now. Everybody knows and I feel left out. Girl, you got me down, you got me stressed out. 'Cause ever since I left the city, you started wearing less and going out more. Glasses of champagne out on the dance floor, hanging with some girls I'd never seen before. 'Cause ever since I left the city.
Hello. 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 Big shout out to Banana for hooking me up with this thing. It works. The chat works. As you can see, there it is. It doesn't look as fancy, but it shows all the emotes. It shows all the platforms. Yeah, it's pretty good. I also use it for my OBS to look in chat, and I can reply in all platforms at the same time. Font should be smaller and a little bit wider. Well, I'll fuck with it later. I can make it smaller. But, is the chat too big? I also don't know how to, like, paint everyone's names and shit. Yeah, I don't know how to do that. There should be a way to do that, but yeah, I don't know. I'll take a look at it later. But yeah, there definitely needs to be colors. But in here it has like it has avatars. What about effects? Fade in, fade out. Hide messages, it works. You can also do text to speech for the messages, but I tried to use it says caller names if caller info available, but apparently it doesn't, it's not available, so I don't know. Well, it is what it is. But it works across different platforms. Yeah, well, this one works, yeah, of course. I didn't change anything regarding that. It just has its own built-in TTS. I didn't activate it, but I could. Echo?
Echo.
Okay, it's gone. Echo is gone. Chill. I forgot to turn it off after you know, I have to click in different things. But yeah, it's a cross-platform chat. It doesn't look as good though.
Cock test number 2.
And as you can see, it's a little bit late. But other than that, pretty happy with it. What else? Yeah, I wondered, so I have an overlay for, I have an overlay for, from Stream Elements for YouTube, because they allow you to connect your YouTube account there. Unfortunately, they don't do like at the same time. You have to have separate overlays, but I have an overlay that I think bot connects to the chat and reads messages and outputs it into the overlay. I think there should be a way to read that chat too and assign it to YouTube instead. But there's also should be a way to adjust the fonts and adjust the weight of the fonts too in the files themselves. I think there's also in the sources, you can also go into properties and you can assign custom CSS, but I don't know if that's going to change the overlay. It should, technically speaking, right? So yeah. Okay. Yeah, now we have multi-stream chat. I can also
This is a joke. Please laugh.
I can also not reply, but I can message in all the chats at the same time. However, what I cannot do is I cannot, like, obviously right-click ban and stuff like that. So it might, you know, be a little bit more complicated when there's like misbehavior going on. But it's fine. I can just Alt-Tab. Now, a chat that does everything would be insane, but for that you would need to use APIs, right? And that's kind of what I wanted to do. I just wanted to have like custom solution to use my own keys and everything, right? And connect directly to chats, so that then potentially you could also do like replies or ban people and stuff like that. I guess you can still do it with the bot, because you can use commands here. With this chat, you have to write it down though. Also, it had some ability to like do macros. I wonder how that works, but that'd be interesting. but I really like what Destiny has. He just has his own fucking platform that he embeds streams in, and it's like a shell for chat and payment system and stuff like that. That is fun. It's also like you can just copy it or some shit. It's like open source, which is crazy to me. But that's a thing for another day, maybe never. Anyway, welcome everyone. Didn't ask you a goddamn thing. My Google activated. So how are you all doing? What's poppin'? What's good? What's new today? What have you been up to? I cooked a meal. I used my potato smasher today. Potato squeezer. Mashed potato maker. It works. It makes mashed potatoes, and it has no little clumps. Pretty cool. Now, it's definitely a tool when you're making a lot of mashed potatoes, I feel like. Because I just did like one squeeze, and that's all the potato I had. It was the first time I ever used it, you know? So, had to go into office? Oh no. Yikes. Also, I cooked some chicken wings in like tomato sauce, because I had some tomato sauce left over. I just made some fucking marinade, and it was good. Sauce. Can I squeeze your potatoes? Sure. Come on over. Place them in the thing. What's up, what's up? Peel them. I have a peeler, dude. So, I'll peel them, I'll squeeze them. Bop it, squeeze it, peel it. Then I fucked around with the chat today to set it up. Then I worked a little bit. I worked a lot. I also was almost dead when I woke up. I felt like I was dying. I just wanted to go back to sleep. But I have a timer. I like to live dangerously. And I have a timer to wake up 5 minutes before my daily call. No video of potato smasher. Yeah. I will definitely post. Not the last time I'm making potatoes, but I honestly didn't have enough time. I was working, and then I was doing this chat, and then I had to cook a meal real quick, and I just finished eating before the stream. So, but I'll definitely post. So, join my Patreon. I post exclusive content there, and only there. I have an activity watch when I sleep. It told me I would be bad at being creative and problem solving today. What? How is that? Why does it even do that? Don't give your mind enough to prepare. You don't have to prepare for daily calls. You just have to do your job, and then you're good to go. I've seen an article that Samsung is making like a ring. But it's like that, you know? It's like wellness ring or some shit. It's like your blood pressure and fucking heartbeat and whatever stuff I don't give a fuck about. I want to open doors with it, man. How difficult is that? God damn it, bro. Fucking sucks. I want to open a door. Oh man. I don't know why is it so hard to make. I just don't get it. Like there must be some bottleneck there. Otherwise somebody would have made it already. But I don't get it. I don't understand what is it. What is it that does not allow you to do that? I just don't get. I just don't get that. That meme will open my head at some point. Guys, I have a cool video for you. Let's watch it.
Їдемо в Бахмут на позицію забирати 300-го. Є 300-й поранений, осколкове поранення. Гладять Бахмут. Бахмут останніми добами горить. І вдень, і вночі.
GPT can't even code the fucking chat overlay, dude.
Я не
It's a piece of
пам'ятаю,
shit.
коли ми зайшли в Бахмут. Це ми в серпні місяці ще 22-го року зайшли. От. І там мали невеликий час.
Didn't OpenAI had like some artifact
Потім знову сюди нас повернули.
bot that
Я не
coded?
пам'ятаю такого дня чи ночі, щоб бої не
Maybe
тривали.
we'll watch it, yeah.
Вони є постійно. Просто змінюється інтенсивність. Бувають такі дні, що ти не встигаєш, ну не то, що там, я маю на увазі то поснідати чи пообідати, в туалет не встигаєш сходити, тому що є
Just
300.
take a shit on
Є
the dead
робота.
orcs, man.
Ух ти. Оп. Заїжджаємо в таку зону неприємну. Тут нещодавно, ну як нещодавно, десь місяць тому було кладовище з машин автотранспорту.
Hello.
Та блін.
I shut it down. I punch it until it stops working.
Да. Вони, видно, тільки заходять, Жека, вони не знають, що це за дорога. Що тут стояти не можна. І гав ловити не можна. От та група людей, ну, от ті, що є у нас в медичному пункті, там є молодь. Ну і мені, який вже трошки прожив, якийсь має життєвий досвід, мені просто шкода. Їм ще треба жити і будувати Україну, сім'ї творити. От. Є старші, які вже трошки прожили, значить, є можливість
I shut everything
виконувати
down.
задачі. Значить, повинні
Laptops too.
виконувати старші. Молодь ще трошки хай збереже життя і здоров'я. В'їжджаємо в Бахмут.
It's cool that these
Влітаємо
murals still
практично,
in.
в'їжджаємо, влітаємо. Свіжі приходи. Блядь.
Maybe.
Але так ви знаєте, де позиції, ну і скільки до них приблизно?
Тут рядом, тут рукою подати. Дуже близько.
Це вже не кілометр.
Та де? Ні, точно не кілометр. Тут може метрів з 600-400 є. До орків, до... Недалеко. Дорогенькі були. Орли. А де він є? Де? А ну присвіти. А що стало, дружище?
На стулку сяде.
Давай
Давай
на
на стулку.
Іди сюди, дружище. Що сталося? А покажи де.
Там, в принципі, на світло якби.
Жонатий бачу, так? Да? Молодець. Діти є? Двоє? Одне. Значить, недопрацювання. Будеш ще працювати над другим, так? Да?
Що йому?
Молодець. Та нічого, що йому. Обезбол.
Там Петрович глянь, є там осколочок чи ні? Я так гляну.
Та то воно. Ну, сип. Тихо.
А, ось він. Що, запійовуй тебе? А да, наверное. Питання до того, що.
У нас все добре. Вчора тільки приїхали.
Важко?
Три недели пробыли. Так как ваше? Работа есть работа.
А хто на вас наступає? Ну це Вагнера чи...
Я такого не знаю, Вагнера чи не Вагнера. Для меня одна нация, пидоры. Все. Для меня другого нет.
It means like smoking, you know?
Сейчас назад приехали, поэтому нормально.
А що, як, ну, учебку проходили?
Да, все проходило. Все показывало.
This is in UK English, okay?
В основному тут є гречка, тут є гаучук, гречка. А там що, блядь, там був той нам високий, блядь. Це йому руку в двох місцях розстрілювало, блядь.
Скажу, я знаю, що він тут загинув під час обстрілу і потім його цивільні поховали тут.
А цивільний хто? Чоловік же?
Чоловік старий, чоловік років 60. І так поховали цивільні, поки тут ще були, поки не виїхали.
Ну, а зараз вже людей немає, так? Людей вже немає просто.
Молодих?
Ну, взагалі все.
Цивільних? Цивільні є, і в будівлі ось тут там 3 чоловіка живе, жінка з поломаною ногою стара. І там живуть цивільні. Навіть в нас тут в підвалі сусідньому живуть. Не всі цивільні виїхали, кажуть, нема куди виїжджати. Дітей нема. Ні, діти всі виїхали. Були аж там, де в нас позиції були, то звідти позабирали, наші вивозили хлопці. А зараз вже немає дітей.
А куди йдете? Нас ребята защищают. Все ребята. Вот. Вот кто стоит, тот нас защищает. Вот эта обстановка. И все помогают. И воду дают, и все дают, и продукты. А почему правительство нас кинуло? А ребята военные защищают нас. И продукты дают. Ни хлеба нету, ни воды, ничегошеньки. Вот. Снимайте.
They are. The military is the government.
А я деда жду.
В смысле?
Дед лежит в Константиновке в больнице.
Так а чого ви до нього не поїдете?
А куда я к нему? В больницу поселюсь? Или как?
Ну, не знаю, ну...
Ну я не знаю. И я не знаю. Я его жду.
Так розкажи мені, ніхто не пропонував виїхати?
Пропонували. Я сказала, я жду деда, я его не брошу, он одинокий. Вот дед живет в моем подъезде. Я его буду ждать. Его привезут сюда, с больницы.
Так хто його сюди привезе?
С эвакуации.
Сюди?
Да, волонтеры и привезут. А потом вместе я деда возьму и вместе втроем мы уедем.
Why? But why? Just go to a different town and tell them to get it to get the dude to you, man. What?
Авиаудар.
She lost it, bro.
Смотри. А там погиб, вот это авиаудар, там погиб его друг с матерью. Вот авиаудар, вот.
Oh man, getting angry, huh?
И он был на опознании своего друга.
Как оно? Ну, все. Тяжко?
Не знаю,
Нет,
ёбнулась.
весело, танцую. Сын с осколочным ранением. 2 ранения осколочных. Один вытащили осколок, другой остался.
Вот смотри, вот твой броник тебя не спасет. У меня осколок в паху. Вот так мы готовим хавать, понял? Как тебе условия?
Треба виїжджати, що я можу сказати.
Да надо. Дед когда, сука, приедет. Я думаю, сам деда не жду. блядь. Как Бога жду.
Красавчики.
What is going on?
Ну, з Богом.
Okay.
Вон приход зліва є. Ззаді там.
At this point, whoever fucking stayed is something wrong with their head, dude. At this point, come on, man.
А от це Жека і Беха, ключ вони на нього хотіли. Блять, їдь давай, ну. Заколебали. Де-то яма, хер бачу.
That's alright, you can watch wherever you want, man.
Це небезпечний кусок, тут прострілюють. Цим треба дати дорогу проїхати, бо вони... Хлопці, потрясе зараз трошки.
You see the pop-up on the stream. What do you
Бачите,
mean?
сьогодні добре, що сьогодні легкі. Взагалі це тішить, коли хлопці наші, якщо є поранення, але вони легкі, от що тішить, що легкі, що не важкі. Ми зараз їдемо на точку передачі, ми її називаємо точку реверса. От. Ми передаємо і повертаємося назад в Бахмут.
Бо є знову.
Так, є там ще контузіяні хлопці. От. Не мали можливості їх там вчора вивезти зовсім з іншого підрозділу, з іншої бригади. Ну, ми маємо можливість, значить, ну, для нас нема різниці, чи це
Yeah, they just hope they're gonna be fine.
От, чи це хтось інших з військовослужбовців, але Збройних сил України. Є потреба вивезти, ми сіли і забрали, поїхали, вивезли.
I thought the same in the beginning. I was correct though, but still, you know.
Молода дівчина. Скільки, Жека, десь уже місяць, да, є? Більше вже. Теж молода.
Це фатально не пощастило.
Що?
Кажу, фатально не пощастило.
Да. Така прогресивна дуже. Талановита, прогресивна молода дівчина. За такими майбутнє України. Жека, дивись, тут осколок. Раз. Тут хай уважно подивляться, тому що тут є панічні атаки, плюс застарілі контузії. Тут є ниркова коліка. От, і після кров'ю. У цих двох контузія позавчорашня, контузія. Запам'ятав, так? Да? Так. Значить, раз, панічні атаки, раз, дві контузії позавчорашні, осколок і ниркова коліка. Все. І вертаєшся назад сюди, Да, бо я ще привезу. Я вам скажу, що було не раз таке.
Just going back and forth, man. That's
Забираєш з позиції, там паніка у хлопців.
crazy, dude.
Не у всіх, правда, це рідкість таке, ну але є, бо то не всі однакові люди. От, і коли ти там надаєш допомогу, зупиняєш кровотечу, там, відновлюєш серцебиття, дихання відновлюєш, і коли люди бачать, що воно гупає там біля тебе недалеко, а ти робиш свою роботу і самі хлопці заспокоюються. Тобто, як би там не було, хтось, як кажуть, має бути в цій когорті товариства людина, яка би тримала ситуацію більш-менш нормальній, такій спокійній психологічній атмосфері. Ну, важко, звичайно, що втримати так, бо коли воно падає і гупає навколо тебе. Але ця війна показала, що основне без паніки. Без паніки. Паніка – це найгірший підказчик і помічник, найгірший. Підійшли до 300-го, яка би там не була важкість, ти бачиш, що він переляканий. Ну, дехто стидається там поплакати, дехто стидається там, що він боїться. Ну, ти кажеш йому, чоловіче, я теж боюсь, я такий самий, як ти, все. Але робимо роботу свою і все.
Вбивають там ворога.
Що забули, хлопці?
На Іванівське туди.
На Іванівське? Та й ви проїхали Іванівське. Там не проїдеш. І там заптурені бехи, танки заптурені. То поїхали за мною.
Yeah.
Так. Вони поїхали посадкою. Так як поїхали, то поїхали. Та що думаю? Зараз що я думаю? Перше, мені шкода місто, це раз. А друге, думаю, що зараз в цей би період, якби я був би вдома, я би садив би якесь би дерево. З сином, з донькою. Якусь би черешню посадив би, яблучко.
Yeah, usually the more professional you are, the more people make you mad when they do some stupid shit, you know?
Ця беха як буде стояти, треба поміняти маршрут, блін. Ох, ох, ох. Не дай Бог, да? Красуня. Це оцей, так? Да?
Ні, ось. Він нормальний боєць, це виповняє, ну не може розмовляти, він нормально розмовляв.
Прилетіло.
А скільки вже не розмовляв?
8. Дней 5 точно.
Та ми зараз ще не прощаємо, зараз.
Віталій, так?
Це не перший в нього.
А прізвище є? Документи маєш з собою?
Да.
Хорошо. А пам'ятаєш, коли сталося? Пам'ятаєш? А ну пригадай, ні.
П'ятиэтажки.
Так. Ну день, два.
Да там
3,
4, 5. Там несколько проходов.
Телефон з тобою, Віталій?
Да.
І документи?
Да.
Все, ну їдеш зі мною.
І спину можна подивитися?
Можна. У вас?
Да.
Що сталося?
Ну тут теж. У мене стара травма ще.
Ну болить спина?
Дуже болить.
Ноги віддає?
Права нога. от
Віддає
я
ноги?
не чувствую.
Взагалі не чую.
Ну як чувствую, ну блядь, больно так вставати на ногу.
Тут все время хуйня происходит. В артиллерии вона періодами, а тут все время хуйня. Все время.
Да.
Матюки, блядь, все. Та ну як жорстко? Ну я не участвував в боях, я связист. Я бігаю, всіх зв'язую, всіх переводжу. Я не участвував. Це ось герой, кстати, от серйозно, оце герой війни, блядь, зараз.
Та ну не герой війни,
Хуяри, всі за нього
трошки
кажуть,
поучаствував,
пулеметчик.
бивший артилеріст.
Тоже, кстати, со мною.
Погано, що це кажу на камеру, тому що якщо в полон попаду, буде піздець.
Да,
Ну,
він,
живим не дамся.
ну він, оце герой, я вам серйозно кажу.
Що геройсько зробили?
Ну,
Стоїть на позиціях,
відбивали
відбиває,
позиції.
та ось теж.
Останнє-
Медик з осколками в ногах, ось, нікуди не уїжджає. Медик з осколками в ногах, нікуди не уїжджає, ось. Стоїть, боронить державу далі, блядь. Витягнув осколки і бігає з нами калашем. ось.
Витягнув і все. І
Да,
далі
дивлюся, синяцюри від осколка і все. Ну, з такими осколками його евакуювали на місяць, мабуть, блядь, отсюда. Ну, чоловік остався до того, блядь, щоб, блядь, лічити пацанов, блядь, спасати, блядь.
Робота така.
Ну ви, я дивлюсь, ви на...
Трофейний маркер з Бахмут.
О, дуже вам дякую.
Ми ж для цього сюди і приїхали.
Що трофейний, це що, москальський чи що?
Не знаю, чи москальський, ну коли нас вибивають, і ти навпомацьки уходиш. І питаюся з собою щось взяти, тому що ті самі ножниці мені предыдущі побили осколками.
Да.
Знайшов нові. Якщо це буде в інтернеті.
Посмішка у вас. Таке враження, що ви десь в Філадельфії.
Короче, красавчик, я взагалі хуєв, він не спав пару суток, приїжджає, я ото накрив, кажу, Вадик, лягай, дихай. А він з нами балакає, все. Я ото його жінки написав сообщення, я кажу, він каже, напиши сообщення. Я кажу, Вадик, я напишу, що ти її любиш, і все. Він, да, спасибо. А він не може навіть сообщення сформулювати, сидить оце отакий, все, вибивається.
А ти розкажи за те, що про мене сказали ще 200. Як ти плакав.
Я плакав так, блядь, на евакуації, да.
Ви ж
Сказали,
знали
що він
підрозділ.
200, а я пацана мотаю, тяжелую руку, мотаю, думаю, так, не буду зараз плакати, зараз його відпустю. Ми тільки місяць общаємося, ми в артилерії були, ми толком знайомі були, але не общались, да.
Ми взагалі з одного города.
А тут
З Верходніпровська.
А тут жили вместе, блін. І я почув, що він 200, сказав, це як пацан, якого я мотав. Думаю, зараз відправлю, потім це відправив. Як начав, Максим ж мечтає бути президентом, кажу, Максим не стане вже президентом.
До речі.
Ні, там вже кожен вже президент.
По факту, а не на словах. Важко було, важко.
Ну вони не
Кожний
спали
день
вообще.
важко.
Вони все время хуярили, не спали. Стояли, держали позиції, там, ну, і розбирають здання. Я там присутствував, ну я не все время. Я прибіг і я побіг далі. Ну не во всіх, де вони були точках. Ну, там утюжать просто і утюжать. І арта утюжа розбирає, все розбирає.
Так ми ж не на курорту були. Я знаю. Мене постійно праве коліно напухше, постійно. Тому що перший місяць я вивозив з Бахмутського важкого на пікапі і мав травму, але, блядь, ну, сам собі надають допомогу і я не йду. Тому що більше сюди ніхто не виїжджає.
Так,
Давай, четвер, чи тобі третій дати?
Це всі ваші?
Скільки у мене раз.
Ладно,
Скільки у мене їх вже? Давай, більше вже.
Та хай, ладно, віддихни. Поправки.
Та він це не медик, це...
А куди це ви стільки тягнете?
Все обираємо, це всіх ранених, 200-х, 300-х, больних, відносимо зброю, щоб зараз дуже тяжело її переносити.
На евакуацію зброю.
Да.
За собою довго носити.
А є таке, як евакуація зброї, да? І...
Ну не то, що
воно
евакуація, просто тут недалеко наші командири. Ми зараз до них віднесемо і вони це все вивезуть на наше.
Якщо максимально коротко, ну не оставляйте це.
Просто
Це
переміщення
200-300,
тяжело їх
да.
з собою носити. Потім ми вчора переміщалися і все тягли на собі, просто тяжело.
Поки є час,
Да.
перетаскуємо, так сказати,
Лишнє
в наш
обираємо.
мінімальний тил. Все, що можу сказати.
Ні, ну пацани, ви взагалі просто богині, я вам отвечаю.
Ми
Ні,
перед цим були боги.
Неділю назад.
Коли тільки
І
зайшли,
І Бог нас
чи ми
спас.
10-11 днів
Да.
назад зайшли. Ну наїлися.
Да,
Саме
нам
хуйове,
наїли.
мабуть, коли працює танчик, а ти
Да.
нічого не можеш зробити, навіть висунути голову. А потрібно ще якось скоректувати, ну, понятно, що це від нас в тих випадках мало залежить.
Все, давайте, удачі.
Давайте,
Давайте, хлопці, давайте
це буде
здоров'я.
Україна.
Давай, брат.
Давай.
Дого!
Вона за нами так біжить.
Три артилеріста.
А я взял рукавицы.
Я не.
Пока у них с собой ничего нема такого.
Ні. Документи у всіх є, всі взяли документи. Щоб потім не...
Жека, ми там проїдемо чи не проїдемо?
Мали би проїхати, але...
Ага, дивись, що тут робиться. Поняв? Ох, бляха, муха. Ох, твою дивізію. Блять. Ох.
Чого ви вирішили іншою дорогою?
Ну, по-перше, там Беха заблокувала виїзд нормальний. От, і дуже зменшується швидкість. Ми просто стоїмо практично на місці. А тут стояти на місці не можна. Треба шукати інший шлях, щоб їхати. Може не так швидко, але все ж таки їхати. Вертаємося на базу. Хлопцям зараз кажу, щоб так само вертались на базу. І будемо надіятись, що...
It looked like it, but it was in good condition, so I don't know.
Ну, по крайній мірі, важких не буде. Акуратно, хлопці, давай руку. Так, Жека, дивись, тут неодноразові ці контузії, тут є порушення мови. Обов'язково сказати, що є порушення мови. Акуратно, акуратно. Так. Тут є контузія спини і віддає в ногу.
Даш?
Ви в будинку якомусь мали позиції там?
Так, вже його і зрівняли. Рядом будинок зрівняли, а вторий спалили просто. І все.
Хотіли вместе з нами.
Да.
І ви вибігли.
Спіли маленько. Чуть-чуть ще так би. І там би осталося.
Минута і там.
Так, буквально.
І у вас всіх контузія від того, що вони попали, да? Ви були поруч.
Нас і палили, і контузія, крім того, і надихалися ми, і реали теж, і все, коротше. І терялись чуть би не сознання там теж, коротше.
А це коли він горів, це чим вони?
Газами, якими скидали, витравлювали, коротше.
А вони сразу артилерії.
Артой, так, всім.
Термічне.
Так, якесь таке, блін, невозможно бути там взагалі.
Типу задихаєшся?
Да, задихаєшся і все.
Вони заходять, маска з кислородом.
Да. Кроме що задихаєшся, ти вже не можеш там знаходитися в тому поміщенні. Ілі ти там ляжеш, задихнешся, ілі так, ілі. Тобто,
А вони виходять, що за типу будинок через будинок їхня піхота чи як?
ой, там чесно нічого.
Вони проламують стіну.
10-15 метрів вони від нас.
Скільки?
10-15 метрів вони від нас.
Ну слава Богу, що ви їдете на спортпункт.
Вже помийся вже, все привести в порядок.
Коли ви мились останній раз?
Ой. Це вопрос сильно серйозний.
Місяць назад.
Дайте спитати смисл життя.
Ну так, протер морду отак, як це, руки хіба що і все. Більше нічого. Яке там миттєво.
А з рідними там могли якось зв'язатися?
Ні.
Ніхто не знає, як ви що?
Ні.
Довго
Ні,
вже?
ну у нас командири.
Ага.
Вони пофамільно знають, якщо там жони дзвонять. Ну, є
То вони кажуть, що цей...
група така
Да,
спеціальна.
їм сообщають, так.
Да, це вони знають, але так, щоб поговорити, то...
Ні, іменно по телефону ні.
Що, зараз вийдемо, там зв'язок є? Та зв'язок уже є.
Ні, вже доїдемо. Вже приїдемо, да, потім будемо дзвонки і все остальне.
Damn, dude. There's some mental shit, bro. Okay, volunteers in the new 420, huh? Do you enjoy repressive laws? I wonder what Russians gonna say about that.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're making this video in front of International Relations Institute. And before this video starts, I would like to tell you about the channel of Denis Islamov.
No, I'm good.
Well, yeah, I don't really
XQC.
think so. I'm actually also like... Excuse me?
Foreigners think that we have repressive laws, right?
Well, yeah, I don't really think so. I'm actually also like partly Russian by my family line, but honestly, I believe it's untrue. It's quite a big stereotype that was built through years actually, and it's actually good to see that people are, let's say nowadays, like visiting Russia, breaking some of those stereotypes down. So I would say that is untrue when you look at reality.
Я думаю, что каждое государство так или иначе нуждается в определенных определенной цензуре, в определенных правилах, которые не всем могут приходиться по душе. Но думаю, что времена репрессий давно прошли.
Russian Southern.
Сейчас это...
Lauren Russian.
Я считаю, что нет. Законы, которые принимаются, они
Lauren
направлены
Soviet.
на, скажем так, укрепление нормативной базы, на развитие и улучшение тех юридических пробелов, которые существуют, и в целом у нас все-таки социальное государство. Поэтому про репрессивность, я думаю...
You have a social state?
По
Do
крайней
you?
мере,
Много
жизнь как
свободы.
студента меня вполне устраивает в России, я довольна. Свобода, которая мне нужна, она есть. Мне ее вполне достаточно.
Это все же для нашего блага.
I feel okay, so I don't care about anyone else.
От того обезопасить?
От иностранного вмешательства.
То есть, думаете, есть реально такое вмешательство иностранное? Мгм. Это со стороны какой-то конкретной страны?
Наверное, США.
Probably? You don't know?
Как вы думаете, существуют ли у нас в стране репрессивные законы?
Ну, я думаю, да. Да, они существуют.
Ну, и в чем они проявляются?
Просто то, что они есть, это факт, и то, что они тянутся с давних времен. У меня прадедушка стал жертвой репрессий Советского Союза, и в семье устоялось мнение, что репрессивные законы, они остались до сих пор.
It's not XQC taking interviews, it's some other
Определенную
guy.
свободу, которую имеет человек, он может быть наказан в вот такой жесткой мере. Поэтому, да, вот все вещи, касаемые свободы человека, свободы слова, его мнения, они караются репрессивными законами.
Это та тема, которая сейчас подвергается статьям, поэтому сильно о ней не скажу. Но вообще мы, можно сказать, что вернулись в то время, когда есть законы, которые достаточно тяжко карают людей. Они не основываются на каких-то определенных уголовных правах, которые были установлены еще в римском праве или раньше. Так.
Ну, наслаждаетесь такой ситуацией?
Нельзя сказать, что можно себя позитивно чувствовать, нейтрально
Do you
чувствовать,
enjoy
потому
it?
что это
Do you
касается
love
каждого человека,
being
это
a
касается
slave?
наших прав, которые
Typical Russian.
иногда
Yes.
могут ущемляться. Мне кажется, нельзя
Take
себя
away
так
my
позитивно
freedoms.
чувствовать по этому поводу.
It's for my protection.
Как вы считаете, вот есть ли у нас репрессивные законы в стране?
Безусловно.
Ну, вот какие могли бы выделить?
Закон о дискредитации армии, закон о фейках.
О, нет, Россия свободная страна. Мы любим очень Россию. Спасибо Путину за такую страну. Но, если честно, не хочу про эту тему говорить.
Вообще такое у нас?
Ну, знаете, вообще у таких стран, как Россия, вообще, по идее, должна быть свобода слова, и люди...
Do you think that there's repressive laws in Russia? I can't talk about it, otherwise I'm gonna go to jail. Does that answer your question?
Репрессивными законами?
Да.
Ну, меня как бы это особо не касается, не коснулось пока что, слава богу. Но приятного мало, конечно, да.
Есть какие-то страхи, что это может что-то ужасное вылиться там в Северную Корею 2.0?
Есть страхи.
Burb!
Есть ли у нас в стране репрессивные законы?
Определенно есть. Конечно, у нас об этом не особо не говорят, но есть. Как бы закон об иноагентах, допустим, он достаточно сильно, скажем так.
No, it's
это
another guy.
достаточно репрессивный, как мне лично кажется, закон. То есть там всякие подковырки есть, с помощью которых можно и засадить человека, и запретить организацию, и экстремистской объявить. Ну, в общем, понятно.
Как думаете, для чего такой закон вообще принимался?
Контроль со стороны государства над медиапространством, в первую очередь над медиапространством, то есть это вот то, что постоянно надо указывать, что страна, то есть организация это иноагент, то есть, соответственно, люди, скажем так, больше доверяющие нашим правительственным ресурсам, они меньше доверяют этой организации. А во-вторых, с объективной точки зрения, это снижение влияния зарубежных сил.
No. I didn't cover that.
Вот есть ли у нас в стране какие-нибудь репрессивные законы?
Ну, возможно, они есть, но я, допустим, не попадаю там под такое влияние и хорошо.
Bro, nobody asked you what do you,
к примеру, таких мыслей, вот,
if you
там, какое будет мне
went to jail or whatever.
себя чувствую в этом плане.
Do we have the laws?
I
Yes.
don't really think there's anything that repressive, in my opinion. As a person who, let's say, also has a more traditional view on things, I really don't think that there are much
Traditional
repressive
view?
laws here.
What does that mean?
On our channel, and people think that there is a law about spreading false information about military, and they say it's a repressive kind of. You can get 8 years for different.
In that case, I believe it is something that was just done incorrectly, managed incorrectly, because in my opinion, I'm not sure if that's safe to say or not, but I don't really think the government should shut someone down in terms of what
If
they
that's
speak,
safe or
even
not.
if it's
No,
true
they
or
don't
not.
have repressive laws.
Because
What a
if the
fucking
situation
moron,
is maintained
dude.
under control, that means that basically they can fix it themselves. Why would they get so bothered over somebody
What a
spreading some
loser.
misinformation, right? What I really
I might get
think,
fucked for saying this, I
let's say
hope
the best
not,
option
but,
for the government is to actually be more open to the people and to show them that even if there is disinformation, it doesn't mean that we need to lock anyone up. We can solve this problem by our own self. We got our own media. We got professional people. So that would be my take on that.
Can you say anything you want on camera?
No, definitely not.
So doesn't
Yes,
mean that
yes,
there are
yeah.
repressive laws?
There are repressive laws in here, I believe. I
Wow.
wouldn't call them totally debunking you down to the ground, but there are laws that limit you to certain.
Wait, now that I thought
let's say,
about
freedom
it,
things you can basically do, talk about. So for me, it's just.
Do you enjoy them, repressive laws?
I don't
the
think.
title of our video. Do you enjoy?
I don't think anybody enjoys them. Of course, there is always a limit, let's say, to what the repressive laws are. Somebody agrees.
They put
on
him in
them,
jail and
somebody
now they
doesn't,
want to
and
trade him for,
I believe there are millions of people who
WikiLeaks
say
guy.
a different answer totally in comparison to mine. But honestly, I don't think anybody likes them.
Но вот какие вы можете вспомнить сейчас? Какие у нас есть законы такие, которые вы могли бы назвать репрессивными?
Вот лично меня в последнее время не нравится отношение нашего государства к свободным пикетам. Поэтому я думаю, что вот закон, запрещающий сольные пикеты.
Ну, есть, конечно, такие законы, их достаточно много, но многие из них я считаю оправданными.
Ну вот первый, который вспоминается, который оправданный, и первый, который неоправданный.
Ну, я не знаю, как он правильно называется, вот эти вот иностранные агенты. Но
Это
я считаю,
оправданные
что да.
Почему?
Но мне кажется, что люди, которые поддерживают другие страны и при этом получают деньги от России, должны быть как-то санкционированы. Неоправданный, ну, это когда касается обычных людей, а не инфлюенсеров. Например, как вот эта ситуация с девочкой, которая нарисовала плакат против войны, и которые хотели отправить в детский дом, в приют, а отца посадить. Но вот такие ситуации, конечно, они тяжелые.
don't you understand that all the laws going to be applied to everyone?
Доходит до того, что обучение на иностранном языке где-то нелегально, где-то его упраздняют. Название фирм также.
You can't learn English.
На английском языке.
Makes sense.
Это
They don't want you to ever leave that shithole. You're locked in.
ГБТ-пропаганды. В нашей стране я бы не сказал, что нет пропаганды. Наоборот, у нас всегда с этим было плохо. И то есть сделали еще намного хуже. То есть вообще даже пикнуть нельзя людям, и они уже со сроком.
Я, безусловно, уверен в том и на себе ощущаю, что они присутствуют. Я бы не хотел говорить, какие именно, но, к сожалению, к великому моему сожалению, да, они есть, их довольно много, и нашу свободу зачастую ограничивают против нашей воли, и это довольно печально ощущать на себе.
Но те люди, которые их устанавливают, они мыслят не такими категориями, как мы. Они думают, что противоположное мнение, оно в принципе не...
Man, I just love that I can just say that Putin is fucking degenerate fucking cuck that takes fucking cocks up his ass, and Russian army are a bunch of fucking homeless losers. They're all gonna fucking die in Ukraine because they can't do shit, and they're just all fucking degenerates that need to be put down. And I'm glad that I live in a country that not only allows me to say that, but celebrates that. Pog-based.
Если оно не
Get fucking rolled. Next time a Russian joins this chat, I'm gonna say that out loud and he's gonna shut off the stream because FSB could be listening.
Нет, я недоволен.
I'll even say that in Russian.
The laws that somehow put on any sort of limitations on the citizens of Russia.
They're gonna be like, why are you watching streams that talk bad about Putin? You're supporting them? No, I came in to troll their...
Freedom of choice. We have these basic principles and...
Prison!
They're actually being followed and even protected by the government. And as for Russia, what can I say? No one is being prosecuted.
You won't be in jail even if you criticize Ukrainian government.
His personal opinion, and
people are gonna be upset with you, but the government is not gonna jail you.
To sharing their opinion, but I have to note that if their opinion, so-called opinion, somehow denominates the reputation of Russian Federation or President Vladimir Putin or the ministers, they will have some sort of sanctions imposed on them. They will be declared as foreign agents, and their professional activity will be limited just a bit. But after all, that works everywhere.
I didn't listen to that guy. What he said. Oh man. Okay, we have a Vlad video.
Hello, beautiful community.
Community. He always says community, man.
With you today, and we're going to talk a little bit.
Yeah, I'll get to the first signs of counteroffensive. I'll get there.
Because
I'm teasing you a little bit.
Been requested about the sentence that Vladimir Kara-Murza has got, but this is really a conversation about the totalitarian progression of Putin's state. So let's give ourselves a little bit of a sort of flavor of what it means and even relate it to the war. There is a latent civil war inside Russia. And it's latent and limited because most Russians aren't taking part in it. They are depoliticized, they are the blob in the middle we discuss. But there are 15, maybe 20% of the population in Russia who are coherently, clear-headedly against not just the war, but the causes of the war, the Putin regime. And they have representatives, which is the Russian opposition, which we sometimes analyze, praise, criticize. Vladimir Kara-Murza is one of their representatives. And part of the reason that the Ukraine war started, part of the reason that Putin invaded Ukraine, is to keep that civil war in Russia latent. Part of the reason innocent Ukrainians are dying, being displaced, and so on, is so that Mr. Kara-Murza and other people like him don't win. So that's the big political context. In terms of the machinery of repression, there is now a motor to totalitarian escalation that is independent of the Kremlin. This is new. This is new. It wasn't there 5 years ago. But there is a kind of motor whereby bits of Stalinist handling of particular situations will start emerging increasingly, and they won't be top down. But this is not the case with Mr. Kara-Murza. He got 25 years for made-up stuff, fake news about the war, quote unquote, and treasonous statements about Russian military and so on. That's just made-up stuff. The real reason he is in jail and he's got 25 years emotionally is that possibly his most prominent contribution has been that he acted as a kind of motor behind the Magnitsky sanctions that actually made him a very personal enemy of the state in Russia. So, and now that probably extends to all sanctions. You know, the Western sanctions have come our way, and you know who's responsible? Well, you know, one of the very earliest triggers is this guy. We're going to get him. We're going to give him 25 years. So I called Vladimir Kara-Murza Mr. Kara-Murza, but he is a young man. He's a few years, a few months younger than me. He is got a few special qualities. One of them is that he is an atypically consensual member of the Russian opposition. He is not got that bug whereby all of them quarrel with one another. That's a very good quality. And he is an enormously morally motivated person. That's to say that there's an element of expressive politics to why he put himself in quite as much danger as he did. In other words, with somebody like Mr. Navalny, the aspiration is to get rid of the Putin regime. Is this step that I can take going to get me closer to this outcome and then give me some kind of chance of being near power? And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but that's Navalny's motivation. It's completely pragmatic. You know, in my, and it's almost exhaustingly pragmatic. In other words, he thinks, well, I'm going to take this sip of coffee. If I take it, will that get me closer to being president or not? If it doesn't, I'm not going to take it, you know? Whereas Mr. Kara-Murza, I think, is in good part motivated by the idea that he finds something unconscionable. He might stand against it. That might have some symbolic meaning and symbolic consequence, but not consequence along the lines of, if I do this, it'll get that outcome, and then that outcome will lead to this outcome, and then that's going to happen in Russia, let's say. So he is more morally driven. But I think with all of the people who are getting huge sentences in Russia, there's also kind of shock, because I think that
pragmatic means that
I don't want to speak for Vladimir Kara-Murza himself here, but I think that
is
with a lot of
focused
oppositional folks in Russia, they
on
didn't
things
realize
that give him gain,
pre-war
basically.
Sentences changed. You know, that a lot of people were sort of expecting
where he gains
2 years
something
here, 3 years there, and suddenly it's, you know, it's 10, 25. So that's a bit of a shock. And this raises questions, you know, what is more effective in principle? To have somebody like him out of prison, especially given the fact that at the moment the Russian opposition is struggling to realize its own task effectively. So it's surely missing a lot of the voices that have been disappeared by the Putin regime. So it would have been good to have him out. But then people who put their neck on the line like that and take extraordinary actions, I don't think you can tell them they did the wrong thing. You just have to respect their decision and wait for years, maybe even...
You never looked at Navalny who seeked power or celebrity? Oh yeah, the guy that, you know, had a documentary that is literally called after him, win at the Oscars. Yeah, totally.
You know, a decade or more to see how it plays out and whether their gamble, as it were, is proven right by history. Is he going to be in jail for 25 years? No, he's not, because the sentence is irrelevant in the sense that he's there until the Putin regime goes, and that could be 3 years, it could be 13 years, you know. If anything, I would even say that if I'm him, I like 25 more than 15 because it simply raises his profile without adding anything of practical consequence to the sentence. The real issue for him is that he has experienced 2 poisonings a couple of years apart, similar to what Mr. Navalny experienced. And his health is precarious, very precarious indeed. He couldn't make it to the previous hearing he had in court. So I think that's more ominous a worry, than the length of the sentence. So that's a little bit of the context. In terms of the motivations of the regime here, I do think that it comes from the top, as I say. I do think that it's possible that the exact number has been agreed by Mr. Putin and that Mr. Putin chose a number for aesthetic reasons. This is Mr. Putin trying out, his uncomfortable new Stalinist clothes. Now, when we say Stalinist clothes, we don't mean that the regime is becoming similar to the Soviet Union from that period. I don't think that's the right analogy. If anything, 1930s European fascism is a better analogy. But Stalinist in terms of scale of repression. That at least pointillistically, the Stalinist sentences are being reached for now, whereas they weren't before. So this comes right from the top. And yeah, there's going to be lots of motivations involved of a pragmatic kind, like, giving 25, does shut people up in Russia who might want to squeak something. And they would perhaps squeak if we went for 2 or 3 years, but 25 could shut them up a bit better. But actually, on top of the pragmatic motivations, there is, that bugger started this whole sanctions story against us. We're going to get him. We're going to get him. Let's get him. And let's get him in a sort of with a nice round number, 1/4 of a century. So I think that that's my sort of sense of the flavor of it. I'm slowly working still on a main channel video about imperialism among the Russian opposition. And it's looking like Thursday at the moment.
Among the Russian opposition?
That's interesting. Functional times, that's of course a fraction of a full-time day for most people. But I spent 2 full-time days by my standards editing the first 2 minutes of that video. So that's gonna change.
Editing is fucking AIDS, dude. We need to automate that, guys. Okay, this is gonna make me mad, somebody said.
Здрасте, вы на эвакуацию? Да. Кто-то Бахмут. Как здесь люди еще живут? Почему здесь люди остаются? Я честно не могу.
Dugin, Russian opposition? I wouldn't say so.
Дед и все, потому что мама отказалась ехать.
Мама не поедет?
Не. Я не еду.
А почему вы не едете?
Ну, потому що внук загинув, а тут треба остатися.
И что, мы вчера вашего внука вывезли.
Dude, my grandson died, so I have to stay here. Huh? Damn, old people and the fucking logic, dude.
Лежит в морге, чтобы вы могли его похоронить.
Я понимаю.
Но.
Вот, ну я останусь.
Почему? Вы понимаете, что вы погибнете здесь?
Не погиб, вот все, Боже.
Ну, они вам то же самое скажут, что погибнете. Здесь оставаться. Вы понимаете, что вы больше никого не побачитесь?
Я побачусь. Я не можу поїхати, я повинна залишити. Дедушка виїжджає, дочка виїжджає і чоловік виїжджає.
Давайте.
Дуже дякую, але не сяду. Ой, тут є підвал оці, і там бабка теж, і там є підвал.
Бабушка, вам нравится вот так жить?
Не нравится.
Это еще не скоро закончится. А может, никогда не закончится.
Ну, колись люба війна кінчається.
Old people, bro, I can't handle this. Truly the stupidest part of population. I can't handle old people, man. Okay. A good Russian, Yekaterina Shulman, currently a Russian liberal guru in Berlin, today on support for Ukraine and Russia, euphemistically, a house of our neighbor burned down, and in our house sewer system leaked. We both think that our own tier is saltier, but the neighbor's house will be rebuilt with the whole world's support. while they forbid us even to think of repairing our house. They tell us you had this situation all the time, and even more, first you need to realize where this shit came from, which is flowing around. As often, for a good Russian, the Ukrainians in the West are guilty in what the Russians did in Ukraine, and as a good Russian, Shulman downplays suffering and deaths of Ukrainians and ultimately requests attention for poor Russians. Also note that the house of neighbors just burned down by itself, not was burned by a drunk, aggressive neighbor with a broken sewer system. Yeah, people didn't appreciate that either. They think it won't happen to me. Everyone thinks that, but at some point, when it already kind of happened, right? It happened. The fucking house she was in, it's fucked. That's it. I don't get it. Ekaterina Shulman, who was until 2019 a member at Vladimir Putin Presidential Council for Human Rights, an oxymoron, is now a Friedrich von Weizsäcker fellow at Bosch Academy and researches in Berlin in the topics of peace and social transformation. Okay. Dude, I can't even read that with a straight face. Okay, let's get to the main news. Counter advance! First, signs of counter advance. Let's take a look. Let's take a look, guys. The armed forces of Ukraine are already conducting counteroffensive actions, says Malyar. The offensive is going on in 4 main directions from the side of the enemy: Bakhmutske, Marianovske, Avdiivske, Limanske direction. Our armed forces of Ukraine carry out active assault actions there, and these are also counteroffensive actions, she explained. Malyar noted that the command already has several offensive plans. One of them will be chosen in a short time, and in such a way that the enemy does not have time to prepare for it. So, basically, these are the directions. So, it seems like we either trying to push the enemy back a little bit so we can get better defensive positions from which we can spread out our attack. So basically, it seems like for the last month and a half, we're doing like preparing for the counter advance on the battlefield specifically. I mean, it makes sense to like cut off the land connection with Russia. If we attack in the Donbass direction, that's where we close with Russia, right? Crimea is just like one bridge at that point. Yeah, pushing Russians away in the congestion of their troops is definitely not only like a strategic but also a moral victory too. I thought all Ukraine's offensives are counteroffensives until they go into Russia. Well, technically, yeah, I guess that's true. This is interesting. Combined with the news that our troops are attacking a lot of radar systems right now, we're getting closer. In the Pentagon documents, the date was April 30th. So while obviously even if the date was not changed and it's true in the documents, it wouldn't have been exactly 30th because day here, day there, you know? But yeah, the end of April, beginning of May. What they mean is that the counteroffensive isn't just one massive attack, but it's starting out with small localized counterattacks, some which are already happening to lay ground. Pretty much. But Ukrainian logistics are kind of stretched. Well, the problem is that we have to cover a very big front line. Because we also have to protect our borders in the direction of Belarus, and like we have way too much, like all of this, right? Is the border that we share. Like that's a lot, and we have to station. We have to station troops on the whole line. There's no meaning behind it. It's just like Luhansk direction, Lysychansk, whatever. But these are the main vectors of attack. Makes sense. Like if you cut off this part, this is the only part that we share the border with. Then blow up the bridge and what is gonna happen to these guys? They're all trapped. Right? Interesting. And there's only a couple of directions there, really. We'll see. It's going to be interesting. It does smell like we're getting closer. And then we'll just finish with a huge... Kaka! Alright. I've been linked this interview. It's like a really good interview, I was told. What is this about?
I'm going to start at the moment right before the invasion of Ukraine. The end of 2021, Joe Biden's being briefed. His intelligence is saying that Vladimir Putin is intending to go into Ukraine, that this is serious. Can you help us understand what the stakes are at that moment? What's on the line for Joe Biden, for Putin, for democracy, for the world?
Well, in late 2021, the Biden administration was faced with this challenge they didn't expect. Namely, a major power is going to invade its neighbor, not just any major power, the Russian Federation, and not just any neighbor, Ukraine, which is on the border of NATO and the European Union. What was at stake is the idea that countries shouldn't destroy other countries for no reason in a war. What was at stake is the international legal framework, which we've been trying to keep going since the Second World War. And what was at stake more broadly, from the Biden administration's point of view, is whether they can be a coherent American foreign policy which makes any difference. And I think they've had a pretty good run at that. First, by trying to persuade other people that the Russians were going to invade, which the Americans are right about. Secondly, by being part of a coalition, which has helped the Ukrainians with arms and in other ways. And third, by talking about what the war is all about, which is that if you let a country invade another country with the goal of exterminating its population, that's not just a horror in and of itself. It's a remaking of the world, which is going to continue in directions that you don't want indefinitely.
So this is really a profound moment for the Biden administration, one that's going to define who they are and really define his presidency.
I think in 100 years, historians will be writing about the war in Ukraine. I'm not sure there's going to be any other event in the Biden administration about which that is true. A lot of the things that seem very important to us right now, like gas prices one summer or whether we're wearing masks or not, that's going to disappear into the mists of time. Whether Ukraine wins or loses, which is very much up to the United States, very much up to the Biden administration, is something that historians are going to be writing about in 100 years.
There's this tremendous effort to try to dissuade Vladimir Putin.
Tremendous
video calls,
effort.
there's statements that Biden makes, there's diplomatic missions going to Moscow trying to convince them, there are warnings, there are threats. Why does it not dissuade Vladimir Putin from invading?
I believe that Vladimir Putin invades Ukraine on the basis of a systematically false understanding of what Russia is and what Ukraine is. Putin helps us understand him by publishing a 7,000-word essay about his own views about history. And in that essay, he makes it clear that he doesn't really believe that Ukraine has any kind of independent existence. There isn't really a Ukrainian state. There isn't really a Ukrainian nation. If you're planning your war on that basis, you think it's going to be all over before anybody else's response really matters. The Russians were planning for a 3-day war. They were planning for a political war. They were thinking that there aren't really that many Ukrainians in the sense of people who'd be willing to risk their lives for their country. And in this, they were entirely wrong. I think what Putin was imagining is that this is all going to be over so quickly that anybody else's reactions, be they sanctions, be anything else, are going to look silly and aren't really going to matter.
When he announces what he calls special military operation, but which is the war in Ukraine, if you go back and you look at that speech, one of the things that's interesting about it, the line that comes out of it is the empire of lies. And a lot of the speech is about the United States. It's about Ukraine, but a lot of it is about the United States in particular. What do you make when you see him deliver that speech?
Well, Putin is, and he isn't talking about America. I mean, this is not a man who really spends a lot of time in the rest of the world. Unlike a lot of the foreign leaders with which he deals, he doesn't know foreign languages. He doesn't know a thing about Ukraine, which is interesting. He thinks he knows everything. He doesn't know anything. And his understanding of Ukraine is based on the notion that it isn't really a place. And if it seems to be a place, this is because of foreign conspiracies. And then in historical reasoning, those conspiracies have been in the past the Austrians, the Germans, the Poles, the Jews. Today it's the European Union and the Americans. So Putin's worldview, which I think he really believes, is that Moscow and Kiev are somehow organically together and always should be. And it's only because of the outsiders that this isn't true. And so what he's talking about is not America as it is. He's talking about a fantasy of America that wants to do these insidious things like take Ukraine away from Russia. But that just shows, in my view anyway, a misunderstanding not only of America and Ukraine, but also of his own country.
Before Ukraine, many Americans didn't see themselves in a Cold War with Russia, didn't see Russia necessarily as a major enemy.
He speaks foreign languages?
America as
What?
a major enemy. How important is it to understand the different worldviews of Americans and of Russians about what's happening and how different they are?
Well, the one thing that one has to understand is that the Russians are systematically wrong about how much attention Americans pay to Russia. The Russians think about America all the time. Americans only think about Russia when they have to. And that is not a reality which Russian leaders can afford to recognize or talk about, because their power, their ideology power, rests on the idea that there are great powers in the world. Russia, America, China. Russia is one of these great powers. And so the basic reality that Americans actually don't really like to think about Russia, they don't think about Russia that much, it would be something which is absolutely unacceptable. But that's a fundamental difference in worldview. Russian leaders are thinking about, not thinking about domestic politics, thinking about foreign policy all the time. And foreign policy is a kind of duel of great powers. American presidents, American public opinion, the American columnists, they're not thinking that way. We only react to Russia when we absolutely have to. I mean, we reacted very, very late and very, very weak to the Russian intervention in the American election in 2016. When Mitt Romney said, when he was campaigning against Barack Obama, that Russia was a serious threat, everyone laughed at him, except the Russians, who would kind of like to think that they were a serious threat. When Obama says that Russia doesn't matter because it's only a regional economy and so on, he's saying something which to the Russians is absolutely incomprehensible. They think of themselves as a great power and they want to prove that they're a great power. So the biggest difference is that Russians really like to think about America because American enmity, the idea that America is trying to hurt Russia, gives Russia a sense of meaning, whereas Americans absolutely do not need Russia for their sense of themselves. That's the basic difference.
The last question on the end of the Cold War is these statements that you would hear. George H.W. Bush says, it's a victory for the moral force of our values.
Yeah, the enemy unites people against the enemy, right?
It wasn't just a collapse of the Soviet Union, that it represented something bigger, that democracy had triumphed. When you look back at that and the contrasting views between Biden and between Americans, I mean, was that a dangerous view that Americans adopted, that it was of the sense of inevitability about what had happened?
I think it's better to say that democracy is a better system than it is to say that it's inevitable. Because once you say that it's inevitable, you're forgetting all the things that you have to do or struggle for in order for democracy to come into being. And that applies not just to us. I mean, our own democracy, I think, arguably is in a worse situation than it was in the late 1980s. It applies to everybody. The Russians, nobody in Eastern Europe was going to get democracy inevitably, and nobody was going to get it just because there was capitalism, which I think was our big, tremendous, stupid mistake at the time. Relying on these larger structural forces, not paying attention to culture, not paying attention to ethics, and imagining that the economic transformation in the form of privatization was automatically going to bring about political changes. That's what we were thinking, and we were wrong about that. And Russians were also wrong about that. The Russians who were in charge, it was convenient for them to think that because the people around Yeltsin were making huge amounts of money at the time. But that was a big mistake, which we should recognize, that that democracy is going to be inevitable because there are no alternatives, as people said. It's going to be inevitable because capitalism is going to bring it. These were all mistakes. and we can learn from these mistakes. Russia, I think, is one consequence of believing in those mistakes. If you seriously believe that just privatizing things is going to lead to a good political system, then Russia should be a good political system because they did privatize things. But in fact, this is a lesson for everybody, if too few people own too much of the stuff, and if too few people dominate the media, you're not going to end up as a democracy, whether you're America, whether you're Russia, whether anybody else.
And I imagine that the former KGB agent who you described, the cynical Vladimir Putin, could see in American hubris about democracy some way that he can operate that we may not pay attention to until it's almost too late.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that we have that capitalism is eventually going to bring everybody around to some kind of reasonable form of politics, the idea that there's no alternative opens a huge window of opportunity for people who do represent alternatives, especially in capitalist countries, which Russia and China, by the way, are. We were very slow to pick up on the particular nature of the Putinist threat, largely for this reason, because we thought, well, because it's capitalist, it will be okay, or we just measure its economic growth and we say it's not very important. But meanwhile, Putin can represent an alternative. He can come up with an ideology which draws people not only in Russia, but in America. He can come up with a counter story about globalization. He can claim that he's the one who embodies values, because we're not talking about values, we're just talking about how stuff is inevitable, which is not very attractive. He can make all those claims, and we're very, very slow to pick up on it, because we're in this story about how history is on our side.
What do you make of that famous meeting with George W. Bush where he says he looks into Putin's eyes and he sees his soul? I mean, back then, did it matter? Did we not understand who Vladimir Putin was? Or was it not clear at that point who Vladimir Putin was?
I think the Vladimir Putin at that time is not the same person we're dealing with now, but there is a constant thread which is in a way representative of Russia. The eyes seeing the soul thing, I don't understand at all. I've never had that experience, but Putin did consistently say, Ukraine is not a real country. And that has been consistently his view. And that's a typical Russian view, that Ukraine is not really a country. And the idea that Ukraine is not really a country only becomes threatening when Ukraine in some way starts to be a better country than Russia, according to measures which some Russians, at least some of the time, themselves accept. Like Ukrainians can vote, or Ukrainians have had a peaceful change of president with an actual election where the votes counted, which Russians have never had. Where Ukrainians are closer to Europe, Ukrainians are going to be able to travel in Europe. Those kinds of things suddenly turn Ukraine from being not a real place,
true. They never had
which
that.
is Putin's first idea, to being not a real place, therefore some kind of concocted.
That's fucking funny. It's true. Russians never had real elections. Like, never.
Threat by the West. But
I didn't even think
common idea
about it.
was not
That's
just
actually
Putin's,
true.
that this is not a real country. That was actually there to hear way back then.
And what's going on in that time? Putin, it seems like, is trying to win over Bush. But by the time you get to the famous speech in Munich, he's describing America as a threat. What is it that turns him? Is it the rhetoric of the freedom agenda of Bush? Is it Iraq? Is it what's going on in the near abroad? What's the progression of those 7 years?
Can you give me the chronology again?
He never travels
So Putin comes
outside
in
the
2000,
country. Yeah, he
and
did,
by
but
the
not
time
anymore, huh?
You get to 2007, he gives a speech at the Munich Security Conference where he says, the West is a threat. And we've talked to people who were there, and they said it was striking to see Putin describe, in rhetoric that's very similar to what he was saying in 2022 about the West. What's his progression of coming to see America as a threat?
I guess it's very important for us as Americans to recognize that the most important things that are happening in Russia are actually happening in Russia, and that the things that Putin says about us are very rarely, and if so only distantly, connected to actual things that we do and say in our own country. That the way to understand Putin, I think, is to follow the failure of his domestic policy. Putin comes to power with the basic idea that Russia can be rigged up into some kind of rule of law state. Dictatorship of the law is the phrase that he uses. He quickly realizes that that's not the case, or at least that he's not the person to do it, and shifts gears to a different program of rule, which involves not getting rid of oligarchy, but being the top oligarch, which is a very fundamental difference. It might look the same because you're rounding up people, putting them in jail, but becoming the top oligarch, becoming the boss of bosses, turning the state into the most important mafia clan is very different than cleaning out the stables. Once Putin makes that turn, that's the important turn, because it means that there's never going to be effective domestic policy. Russians are not going to get the things that you're going to get out of the rule of law, like social mobility, freedom. They're not going to get that. What they're going to have to get instead is a foreign policy of spectacle. So we, the West, are the enemy of choice for Putin. And the reason why we're the enemy of choice is that defining the West as the enemy feeds into a very long tradition in Russia, A, and B, it's also very safe because we're not actually going to do anything aggressive with respect to Russia. So the way to understand Putin's turn against the United States is not to feel guilty about American policy. It's not
West
to
is
imagine
too
that we're
cocked.
responsible for everything, because we're not. It's not to deny him
bust
or
his
Russians
balls.
agency because they have agency. It's to understand the failure of Putin's domestic policy and his recognition that what he needs is a kind of permanent spectacle which comes out of foreign policy, and that the Europeans and the Americans are always going to provide that. Now, when I say that, I'm not saying that American foreign policy has been good. The Iraq War was an absolute disaster, and I said so at the time. And the Iraq War has played a later indirect role in the Ukraine war, which maybe
The
we can
second
talk
one?
about. But what I am trying to say is that it's very important as Americans not to think that everything that Putin does is because of some little thing that we did. The most likely explanation is that what Putin is doing in foreign policy has to do with his needs in domestic policy.
When Vladimir Putin says, look at the Americans, look at Hillary Clinton talking about democracy in Russia, or Victoria Nuland or Michael McFaul or whoever it is, that they are interfering. What is he doing there? Is that something he believes? Is that for show? What does Vladimir Putin see when he sees Americans coming to Russia, talking about democracy, talking to activists?
I think he sees a threat. I mean, the Putin system is based upon turning democracy into a ritual using what Russians call the administrative resource. Because there's no alternative ideology to democracy, Putin only survives with a repeated legitimation that democratic theater acts, democratic performances provide him. So every so often, every 6 years, we're going to have an election and Putin's going to win that election. And he has to win it by a lot. Not because people actually believe in the results, they don't, but because the election proves that he's the one who's in charge, because he's the one who's running the election. Right? That's how it works. The idea that elections could be real, whether it's Pompeo who's saying it or Clinton who's saying it, the idea that elections could be real is a threat. Putin needs Russians to believe that elections are always a circus, a farce, and a fake. Because if Russians believe that British elections and German elections and American elections are also fake, they're not going to mind that their own elections are fake. So when Americans come to Russia and talk about votes being counted, I think he authentically regards that as a threat. And the way he expresses that sense of threat is to say, our democracy is real, their democracy is fake. We care about ourselves, they only care about meddling in our politics, and so on and so forth. But I think the concern is that people in Russia might actually believe that there are places in the world where votes are counted.
Joe Biden goes there in March of 2011 and speaks to students and talks about democracy. Do you think that
This is actually very interesting because we saw in 1420, I remember there was some people saying that like Biden wasn't elected either, they was installed, they just don't believe that it's like a thing. That's fucking funny.
Biden or any of the Americans who go understand that, it's so common in America to talk about democracy and talk about values. Do you think they understand how it's seen by Putin or that it's going to lead to that reaction from him?
I think that American policy, as I understand it, was based upon the assumption, which I think is sound, that we would be living in a more secure world, not just a freer world, if there were more democracies in it. Putin's reaction is not to the Americans talking about democracy. Putin's reaction is to the idea that there might be democracy in Russia, an idea which, by the way, is much more threatening when it comes from near neighbors like Ukraine, where Russians could actually see, the system is actually working. I think in general, Americans are aware that
They also
that
don't
Putin is
believe
going to like
Zelensky
them
was
talking
elected,
about
obviously.
democracy. I don't think there's any kind of surprise there. What I would caution against is the idea that Putin is reacting to the Americans. He's not reacting to the Americans. He's reacting to the threat of the idea that there might actually be democratic elections in Russia. It's very convenient for him to frame this as great power politics. The Americans are not talking about democracy. They're talking about their own geopolitics, and they're pretending to talk about democracy. That's what he's going to say. That's very comfortable. That works very well. But he would be saying that regardless of what we were talking about, I think.
By the time you get into the Obama administration, we talked a little bit about that.
Obama, no.
Like how seriously do you take Russia? And there's that famous moment, of course, that you mentioned with between Romney and Barack Obama. Do you think that Barack Obama and the administration took Vladimir Putin and Russia seriously enough?
I think they didn't understand the Russian state in the correct way. The Russian state is not about a creative project. If the Russian state were about a creative project, then in some sense, President Obama would have been right when he said, no, it's just a regional power. Because it's correct, Russia doesn't have a big economy. It doesn't really set an example for anyone else. So in that narrow sense, where you think economics and ideas that are familiar to us are all that matter, then maybe Russia doesn't matter so much. But that's imposing our own criteria on the Putin regime. The Putin regime was never about creating things. The Putin regime is about removing alternatives. It's about making the normality that is Russia, the corruption, the inequality, the spectacle, the constant line, seem normal. And the way you make it seem normal is by making it be normal, not just in your own country, but in other places. So what the Russians became very effective at doing by way of their international propaganda, and then later by interfering in elections, is messing things up. Taking the worst of other societies and bringing the worst tendencies to the fore, finding by digital means and otherwise our weaknesses and making those weaknesses greater and greater. So the Obama administration was totally blindsided when the Russians decided to try to alter our electoral outcomes. But it was totally consistent with the way Russia sees the rest of the world. Russia's not trying to make America like Russia. Russia's just trying to turn America into a total mess. That's what they're going for. And that's a kind of power. And it's consistent, by the way, with a lot of Soviet history, that it's not so much about necessarily making everybody believe your ideas. It's more a matter of making sure that nobody else can mount a serious challenge to you, undermining everything else.
That's true. Remember Vlad was saying that Russian propaganda is all about confusing the fuck out of you. It's not having a consistent message. It's not having a worldview. It's just like trying to throw in as much shit as possible so that people will start bickering among themselves. Look how well it worked in America, right?
It's making everything else a shambles, and then you may be shambolic, but provided that you're no more shambolic than anybody else, you're going to be okay.
Biden actually gives the speech about the reset, and Hillary Clinton gives them the button. I mean, was that ever going to work, or was Vladimir Putin always needed the U.S. as an enemy, as somebody who's interfering, as somebody who's causing trouble? Was it by that point, was the reset ever going to work? Were things ever going to be put back, as they were hoping early in the administration?
I think that we generally just don't take Russian domestic politics seriously enough, and therefore we don't take Putin's position seriously enough. Of course, the reset wasn't going to work because there's nothing that America did which was actually that important inside Russia. I mean, I'm sorry if I'm like undermining the whole premise of your program, but there's literally nothing that we do which is that important inside Russia. American foreign policy does not matter that much in Russia. What matters in Russia is what happens in Russia. They have chosen to have us as their foreign policy enemy because that is convenient for them and it works very well in domestic politics. There is nothing we can do to change that. We could all wear the Russian flag as t-shirts every day. We could get up in the morning and we could all sing the Russian national anthem. It wouldn't change that. There's nothing, the reset, nothing else that could have changed this because it's a need which comes out of domestic politics to have a convenient enemy of choice. So no, I don't think the reset ever could have worked. And I think it's kind of one more expression of American vanity because the idea is that, well, we did something wrong. And if so long as we have some kind of course correction, they have some kind of course correction, it's all going to be okay. But the problem was just much deeper than that.
Yeah, I mean, you're not undermining the premise of what we're trying to figure out, because the question is, did we understand on the American side, and then I'll ask you more about on the Russian side too, is like, did we understand who we were dealing with and what their actual worldview was, or were we projecting? In that case of the reset, I guess that's the question. It was, did the Obama administration really understand Vladimir Putin, really understand Russia as they were trying to deal with him?
I think the answer to that is fundamentally no. The Obama administration, I think, misunderstood Russia and also misunderstood what it would take to reorient American foreign policy. The Obama administration thought that we can repair relations with China and Russia will just somehow follow along one way or the other. I don't think you can treat it that way. I think Russia is an independent issue and you have to take Russia seriously along with the Europeans, which is where the Obama administration also went wrong. We needed to be with the Europeans vis-a-vis Russia rather than imagining that we could go off and solve something with China, which we pretty much completely failed to do. What we fundamentally didn't understand is that for the Russians, it's not that there's a foreign policy problem but they want to solve it. They don't want to solve the foreign policy problem. They want to have the foreign policy problem in a form that they can handle. So for the Russians, the real foreign policy threat is not us. They're not really afraid of us. They're really afraid of China. But that fear is so deep and that geopolitical problem is so real that they prefer not to talk about it at all. What they would rather do is have the Americans as the cartoon enemy, basically, because that works in domestic politics, and it's not really risky because we're not ever really going to do anything. Is the basic idea. So we can be more friendly or less friendly. We can turn the dial this way or that way, but it's not going to change that basic reality.
I mean, in this period, too, is the Arab Spring, is Obama, who comes in a little bit skeptical of the freedom agenda of the Bush administration and, spreading democracy. By the time you get to the Arab Spring, the rhetoric, at least, is democracy is coming. It looks like maybe Russia is part of it, maybe other countries as well. I mean, from the Obama administration, was there a hubris about what was happening, about whether they had to do anything or they could just support it rhetorically? How do you see the Obama administration at that point in the rhetoric of democracy, especially in regards to Russia, but in that era after the Arab Spring?
I think the Obama administration was right to talk about democracy. I can't imagine a coherent American foreign policy, honestly, which doesn't talk about democracy. I think if we think our system is better, we should be advocating our system as being better. The criticism I would have is that the hubris is more a matter of thinking that history is on your side, and history is never on your side. And as soon as you think that history is on your side, you got to reevaluate your assumptions because there's no such thing as history which can be on your side. And I think the whole arc of history bending towards justice, it's a nice thing. It's when one likes to believe things like that are true, but there's no arc of history. It's not bending in any particular direction. You can make democracies happen, but to make democracies happen, you have to first set a really good example yourself, and second, understand the countries that you're dealing with. And in the case of the Obama administration, I think we dismissed Russia as weak rather than realizing that the people who run the Russian state are very intelligent, that they have no desire to have democracy at all, that they're not just going to wait and let it happen to them, but instead they're going to go on the offensive and try to undermine it in other places. This isn't to say, though, that everything is our fault. When Putin looked at the Arab Spring, or when Putin looks at Gaddafi, it's absolutely right that he thinks they're dictators, I'm a dictator, they're tyrants, I'm a tyrant, they end up in a cage, I could end up in a cage. He certainly thinks that because that is the logic of being a tyrant. As we know from Plato to Shakespeare, the logic of being a tyrant is that you're going to be afraid of ending that way.
He's really
in fairness
scared.
To the Obama administration and everyone else, there is nothing that we could have done to stop that. When you are the boss
it's
of
funny,
bosses,
but
when you are the tyrant,
but
you're going to be afraid of ending up in a cage. what you're going to want is
end
to
up in the
sway your
cage.
bed, and that is a logic which is true and irresistible, regardless of what American foreign policy is going to be. So he was going to look at the Arab Spring the way he looked at it, regardless of how we talked about it or what we did.
By the end of the administration, the Maidan seizing Crimea, eventually there'll be the war in the East. What was the message that Putin was sending in that, or what was the message we should have been receiving at that moment?
Well, the message Putin had been sending since 2008 in Georgia was that he was willing to intervene militarily in his neighbors if he could get away with it. And the if he could get away with it is really important, because what America thought, or Americans thought, or our administration at that time thought,
Putin
is
is
that
a nasty,
we were winning the war of
yeasty
ideas.
pussy. That's
we are
what
winning
he
the war
is.
of words. History, culture, all that stuff is on our side. But that was wrong. What Russia was able to prove was that, no, as a matter of fact, we can invade a country, and we can make you think that it didn't actually happen. Russia invaded Ukraine and basically persuaded us that it didn't actually happen. While Russia was invading Ukraine, the most important thing that was happening in the minds of the West, not just Americans, were discussions about whether there had been a coup in Ukraine, or whether the Ukrainians are all Nazis, or maybe they're all gay, or maybe they're all Jews, depending on what social media you were following, right? The Russians totally had our minds in a trap at that time, and we were totally unprepared for that. Not just the Obama administration.
It's also the weak leadership of Ukraine at that point, that was at the point of the war was in disarray, and afterwards did not have a strong position to steer the course. So Zelensky, big balls, big guy, huge thanks.
But American public life in general. They outsmarted us, they ran circles around us, and they did it by appealing to what they already knew about us, because they were paying attention to us, at least in the negative sense of knowing what our vulnerabilities were on social media. So when they invaded Ukraine, which they did in 2014, we were unable to talk about it that way. We couldn't say war, we couldn't say invasion, these basic realities of life we couldn't talk about, because we got ourselves all tied up in these discussions which the Russians invented for us. So what we were not prepared for was the possibility that actually the ideas and the culture and the digital technology were not working for us. They were actually working for somebody else. We were totally unprepared for that. And I think to this day, we haven't quite figured out how we got that wrong. And if anything, it's the Ukrainians in 2022 with their own social media and the way they're approaching it, which are kind of teaching us how you might deal with a situation like that.
Zelensky is the boss.
I mean, we might have been unprepared before, but Vladimir Putin straight out lies to Barack Obama, says, no, I don't know anything about the little green men in Crimea. I mean, what lesson at that point, if we weren't prepared for what was happening in the moment, as the dust cleared and it became very clear what had happened, and then by then what's going on in the East? I mean, what lesson did we take? What lesson should we have taken back then?
Yeah, I think I just really wouldn't want to underestimate how important the Russian
regardless
propaganda
of what
was
you think
at
of
that time, because it's
Zelensky,
hard to
anyone
take a
who
lesson
thinks
from
bad of
something
Zelensky is
when
a
you
fucking
haven't really
degen.
understood that something is happening. And in the American mind, if you go back and read the press from those weeks and months, this is very clear. It just wasn't clear that an invasion of Ukraine was happening. I mean, if there'd been a single column story in the New York Times one day, which had just said, Russia invades Ukraine, that would have been so much more useful than the endless discussions we had about a whole bunch of things which either were irrelevant or weren't happening. But we couldn't get ourselves to the moment where we just have a single column story saying Russia invades Ukraine. We can't learn a lesson if we don't know the thing is actually happening. The lesson that we should have learned in domestic politics is that the Russians have found techniques using social media to structure and frame what's going on. They did that in 2014 when they invaded Ukraine, and then they did it in 2016 to great effect when they intervened in our presidential elections, using the same people, the same institutions, and the same techniques. So once we had been had in Ukraine in 2014, we should have been better prepared for being had in 2016. I made that connection at the time, and I tried to persuade other people that this was what was happening, but so I remember this very vividly. Nobody was going along with that. Nobody thought there was anything we needed to learn from 2014 because we hadn't realized how much we'd been fooled in 2014.
Let me ask you another way, which is, by the time you're getting to the debate inside the administration, which is about, like, do you send javelins, do you send weapons to Ukraine? I mean, by that point, it is clear who is involved and what has happened. And was there a lesson, by that point that wasn't learned? I mean, it sounds like a lot of people inside the administration were advocating for it, and the president was really the one making the decision in that case. What do you think of that decision and whether they were really understanding what was going on?
Well, I think we were caught up in a world where fundamentally it was going to be ideas and economics, and they were fundamentally on our side. So therefore, we make some public relations announcements and we have some sanctions, and our job is done, which was basically our policy. I don't think we were in a world where we were thinking the Ukrainians are real people and they might want to defend themselves. I think that's fundamentally the problem, that Russia's not an important country, and the countries next to it are even less important. And what are we really going to do here? What's you're asking me to kind of decode what the president himself thought, and I don't know. I can only talk about the kind of the factors which were around it. But I think the thing that we basically didn't understand is that Ukraine could have defended itself. If we had done in 2014 more like what we've done in 2022, we never would have gotten to 2022. I think all the dancing around about whether we send javelins or not was just bizarre and kind of a weird example of American vanity, because you're not a party to a war because you give weapons. If that were true, then every country in the world would be a party to every war which is going on, because we're constantly giving weapons and selling weapons. We went on for years with this debate about whether we should arm Ukrainians. It's obvious that we should have armed Ukrainians. If we'd armed Ukrainians earlier and better, I think we'd be in a better world now.
Does Putin take a lesson from that?
Putin takes a lesson from Syria when we say there's a red line and there's not a red line. And Putin takes a lesson from Ukraine when he's able to invade a country which is in seized territory, which is a fundamental violation of everything that we say is the basis of our legal order. The whole thing. The idea that one country does not invade another country and annex territory is the entire foundation of the United Nations and its Security Council, of which Russia and America are members. And our reaction is minimal, right? And so of course he takes a lesson from that. The lesson that he takes from that is that this kind of thing can work if we gin it up properly. And that's not the message that we really wanted to be sending at the time. But I think the other lesson he took from that, totally understandably, is that if you can just get the Americans to talk about themselves, you can get away with a lot of stuff, right?
True! Oh my God.
Separate out the propaganda from the war itself, because the Russians won a propaganda war in a way which a propaganda war has rarely been won. In this century, in the past century, in any other century. It is very rare that country A invades country B and country C talks about other subjects entirely. So one of the lessons he learned is that you can mess with the American political mind, which he applies in 2016. If anything, in 2022, he thinks we're too much of a pushover, and he doesn't work hard enough on the propaganda side because he just thinks we're just complete idiots. But which we turn out, fortunately, not to be.
Is the conflict in Ukraine about democracy and about authoritarianism at that point? We talked about how we had this rhetoric about democracy and about the Arab Spring, and was that on the line then? Did the president realize that? Did we recognize it in those terms?
We didn't take the Maidan in Ukraine seriously enough. So Russia invades Ukraine because it looks like Ukraine could become a functioning rule of law state, which would join the European Union. It doesn't have a whole lot to do with America. What it has to do with is the possibility that a post-Soviet country next to Russia, where lots of people speak Russian, which is in some ways not so different from Russia, that country could actually become a rule of law state, a democracy, and join the European Union. That is what Russia needed to prevent in 2013. And that's what Russia needed to prevent in 2014 when it invaded. That's what was really going on. It was really about democracy. It wasn't about American presidents talking about democracy. Different subject. It was about actual democracy in Russia's actual neighborhood, which is an actual threat to Putin. The European Union is also an actual threat to Putin, although they don't like to see themselves that way, because the European Union shows that you can take flawed post-communist states, and with a little bit of encouragement, a little bit of aid, and some norms, you can make them into prosperous countries. That would be very bad for Putin if his people actually believe that. So from Russia's point of view, it was all about showing that Ukraine is actually a joke. It's never going to join Europe. I don't think we got any of that, because we were taking neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians seriously
only English
enough. But that was a story about how Ukrainians had understood that for their country to have a rule of law, and if the protesters on the Maidan, the 1 million people who came out of the Maidan, when they were polled, the thing they said was most important to them was the rule of law. Not language or all the other things that we were obsessing about in the US. What they wanted was the rule of law. They wanted their country to be a normal country which could join Europe. And that's what Russia needed to stop. That's what it was all about. And the Obama administration said very little, and what it said very late about the Maidan. It's not something that we took very seriously, unfortunately.
As we get to the election interference, does Vladimir Putin, we talked about this idea that we thought democracy had triumphed in the post-Cold War and that it was going to go forward on its own. Does Vladimir Putin understand something about the weakness of America, of American democracy, that Americans don't or didn't understand at that time?
They always have the advantage of believing in the worst parts of human nature. And we are not better than anybody else. We may have better or worse institutions, but we're not better than anyone else. And the KGB instinct, the Soviet instinct, that every psychology has a weakness, and the way that you perform your work and indeed perform your life is to find that weakness and expand it and exploit it. That can work on us. That can work on American democracy. So I'm not sure that they understand us in the normal sense of what I understand. I think they have a protocol that they follow.
You're laughing at that, but that works. That makes people believe shit like that. They speak the language, and then they watch their fucking dumbass TV that puts all kinds of fucking ideas in their mind, and boom. They don't even see the difference anymore. That's why fucking hating on Russian language in Ukraine is the most basest fucking thing. A lot of young people, especially, it becomes right now with such a climate in our country. I've seen so many people that are younger than me switch to Ukrainian than people who are older than me. Glad to see it, but the fucking boomers need to catch up, dude.
They use it in interrogations, and that
nobody should speak Russian here.
Where they seek out weaknesses also works on social media. Because remember, the way they try to throw the election doesn't have to do with people in touch with people, not really. It has to do with the mechanical collection of data which reveals weaknesses. So do Russians understand American racism? No. But do they understand that people reveal their racism on Facebook? Yes. And so then they can appeal to racists on Facebook. Do they understand what it's like to be an African American in the US? Obviously not. Do they understand that African Americans might be sensitive to claims that Hillary Clinton is a racist? Yes, they get that. And so what they're doing is they're following a protocol which says, look for the psychological weakness, expand it, exploit it, hit it, make everything about that. And they're taking the data which social media provides to generate a coherent approach to trying to affect an American election. I don't think they understand us. I don't think they have to in order to follow this protocol, any more than a KGB interrogator really had to understand a dissident in order to try to hurt that person, exploit that person, or turn that person.
When suddenly you have a president who's very different than all of the other presidents we've talked about, who talk about democracy and freedom and going back to H.W. Bush and even to Reagan, somebody from a completely different tradition. What is the view, if not personally from Vladimir Putin, from the Kremlin, from Russia, as they're watching this new president come in?
So I hesitate to answer the question of what Putin is thinking about Trump, just because I think they're thinking all kinds of things that we don't know. I mean, I think they have their views about how this person is going to destabilize America, which are probably informed by data that we just don't have. The things that, because they've obviously been paying attention to this man for a long time. So just how they see him, I think, is something we can't quite get to the end of it. It's clear that Putin wanted Trump to win. He said as much. It's clear that he applauded Trump's idea that the European Union isn't really a thing and that NATO should perhaps be weakened. That's all clear because Putin has said so. That's all absolutely clear. In general, what Trump does for Putin is he normalizes the Russian way of doing politics. So Putin's view that democracy is a joke, you can lie all the time, politics is fundamentally about some rich guy becoming richer, corruption is normal, right? Trump normalizes that for the whole world. So it's a huge gift for Putin because the United States, although it doesn't matter as much as it thinks it does matter a lot. And so what Trump did was he took Putin and he made Putin normal. He put Putin at the middle. Putin was now no longer something exceptional. Putin was now normal, thanks to Donald Trump. And that had a tremendously negative effect on politics around the world, I think.
Was there something that they were hoping to get from Trump? I mean, you talk about, is it destabilizing America? Is it destabilizing the Western alliance? What are their hopes for that Trump presidency?
Look, it was a bonanza for them, the way it actually turned out. So before we talk about what they were hoping, the Trump administration was just a feast for the Kremlin every day. Because what the Trump administration delivered every day in its outrageous rhetoric, in its disrespect for American institutions, and in the countless scandals was what Russian propaganda outlets dreamed of. They dream of this kind of raw material which proves that democracy is a joke. Trump is there to tell you that democracy is a joke. That's what he's there to tell you. He's there to tell you that the rules don't apply to everyone equally. They don't apply to him. He's there to tell you that might makes right. He's there to tell you that you can lie every day, not just in Russia, but in America, which, that's what he did. He lied every day, all the time, just like Putin. So they had other hopes, but Trump gave them the basic thing that they wanted, which was an American administration, which was an embarrassment for everyone who cared about democracy, an American administration which showed that Russia was more normal, right? That's what they crave. They crave the rest of the world, the democratic world, to say, actually, Russia's normal. The way things happen in Russia is the way things happen everywhere else, because if that's what people believe, then there's no threat to Putin and his regime. So Trump did Putin a huge favor just by his existence.
That's why Putin hates Zelensky so much.
They wanted...
Every fucking statement Zelensky makes is he, just underlines how degenerate fucking Russia is with everyone involved in that fucking degenerate country. Based as fuck, dude. Oh my god.
America, which would pull out of NATO,
Huge.
Which they'll likely get in a second Trump administration, if there is one, or at least an attempt in that direction. I think they wanted an America which would separate from the European Union, which they got to a considerable extent, and which the Biden administration has had to work very hard to repair. And again, if there's another Trump administration, I think we can probably say goodbye for quite a while to American-European cooperation. And one thing which they wanted, which they got, and which they celebrated was a coup attempt. They loved January 6th. Nobody loved January 6th more than the Russians did. January 6th showed that all this stuff about peaceful transitions of power and consensus and the American Constitution, they just loved it. They lapped it up. They reproduce it all the time. They talk about it all the time. That was. I mean, Trump gave them 4 years, which was one big gift. But January 6th was like the wrapping, the beautiful wrapping, the package, which they'll just never forget. I mean, if he's elected again, if he becomes president again, I should say, I'm sure he'll come up with new things. But January 6th was an extraordinary gift to Russia.
For Vladimir Putin, however he experienced at the time, now talks about the collapse of the
Bro, every American needs to watch this fucking interview. Holy shit.
Union and what he saw in Germany as being such a searing time, to see something like that happening on the steps of the Capitol after watching, the West
1.6
celebrating
million
the fall of
views,
the
not
Berlin Wall.
enough.
Here's images that are sort of reminiscent in America. How much he have taken that?
Well, I think he understands all of this in terms of vulnerability. So he doesn't know why the Soviet Union fell apart. Putin has no idea why the Soviet Union fell apart. His whole story of why the Soviet Union fell apart is utter nonsense. The story that they tell is that the Americans wanted it to happen and therefore it happened, which A, we're not that powerful, and B, and I was there at the time, our policy in 1991 was to keep the Soviet Union together. It wasn't to make it fall apart. So, but the way he sees the world, it's all just about power. It couldn't have mattered that people in Lithuania or Ukraine had ideas about the Soviet Union. It couldn't have mattered that there were legitimate disagreements inside Moscow. None of that matters. It's just about power. The Americans showed their power. And so now he was showing his power. Now it looks like the Russians are powerful. Look what we can do. We can make a mess inside American politics, which ends with bloodshed on the steps of the Capitol. And since we've shown that we're powerful, what are we going to do next? We're going to invade Ukraine. Because obviously this crew of people who can just barely get Biden into office, this crew of people is not going to do anything about that. So January 6th, apart from anything else, leads directly to the war in Ukraine. Because it looks like America is not just morally discredited, it looks like America is weak.
Let's just pick up one thing about Ukraine, which is you were talking about Ukraine as an example of this important conflict here between democracy and authoritarianism and being an actual conflict, and not just rhetorical, and Trump's approach to Ukraine, which we know he described as sort of a corrupt country. There's obviously the famous phone call. What does Trump's approach to Ukraine tell us? What does it tell us about democracy and authoritarianism and what would happen?
Well, in Trump's world is like Putin's world. They're big guys, they're little guys. It's all about force. You respect the person who can humble you. Therefore he respects Putin, but he doesn't respect other people. He respects Putin because he knows Putin helped him get to power. He thinks that Russia is a great power, and in this sense, as in so many others, his view of the world and Putin's view of the world overlap. It's very comfortable. Russia's a great power. The countries around Russia are not real places, and of course, Trump doesn't care at all about democracy. He doesn't care about American democracy. He doesn't care about anybody's democracy. He's a gift not just to Putin, but to all dictators around the world, especially the ones who came out of a quasi-democratic background, because he seems to show you can start from democracy and end up in tyranny, right? That's what Trump seems to show. That's why he's so beloved among a certain class of dictator. So what Trump does with Russia and Ukraine is he personalizes all of it. It's all about Putin. Putin, a lot of Americans have this problem. We just talk about Putin, but Trump really personalizes it. It's all about Putin. Putin's the one who really has power. The Ukrainians and Zelensky, who are those people? They don't really matter. They're just secondary. So might makes right. Naturally, the Russians are going to do what they're going to do. And when it comes to the interaction between President Trump and President Zelensky, we see that the only thing which matters to Trump is staying in power personally, because of course he needs to avoid prosecution and he needs to avoid challenges to his wealth. So he needs to stay in power. And in order to stay in power, he's willing to try to blackmail Ukraine and its newly elected president by saying, we're going to take weapons away from you unless you pursue this basically insane investigation, which, by the way, all the Ukrainian investigative journalists know is bogus, this insane investigation of the son of my rival. So he's not taking Ukraine or Zelensky seriously as a country. They're just there to help him in his re-election campaign. That's it.
In the statements that Ukraine's just a corrupt country, obviously there is corruption in Ukraine, that it's just a corrupt country, how did that play into that perception, that conflict between democracy and authoritarianism?
It's really important. So all countries have problems, right? So America has a problem with racism. Are we just a racist country? It's pretty fundamental, but we're not just a racist country. Other things are going on. All democracies have these issues. Is France a post-imperial country? Yes, it is. But there are other things going on in France that make France, not a completely lost republic. Does Poland have a problem with its judiciary? Certainly it does, and so on and so forth. Ukraine has a problem with corruption. Absolutely, Ukraine has a problem with corruption. But that became a sort of trope where, thanks in part to Russian propaganda, it was pushed to a degree where people would say, well, it's not really a state, it's a failed state, which is something the Russians said over and over again. So what happens is that people use various things that are in some way or another kind of true about Ukraine in order to turn Ukraine into a place that doesn't really exist. So the languages question is another issue. People in Ukraine speak 2 languages. What's wrong with that? I think it's kind of nice. I wish more of my students spoke 2 languages. But somehow speaking 2 languages becomes bad. It means you don't really know who you are. It means they're not really a people, and so on. So these things which are kind of true in one way or another, like the corruption or like the languages, become an argument for saying Ukraine's not really a place. And we are not really paying attention. We're not really experts. The Russians are taking these themes and they're driving them home as seriously as they can, which leads us to this almost implausible situation of Donald Trump, who is like the walking embodiment of corruption, talking about how other people in other countries might be corrupt.
What was Joe Biden's approach? Was it different from other presidents?
Well, I'm going to judge the Biden administration from how it reacted to a crisis. And
that's kind of crazy. If technically, if Trump would win the second term, I could have died. And ironically, I probably would have been dead. That's fucking crazy.
The way they reacted to a crisis was to recognize that the crisis was real. And that, I think that does them credit. They were right that Russia was going to invade Ukraine. They were right to try to persuade other people that Russia was going to invade Ukraine. And where I think they stand out, both from not just other democratic, but all the previous administrations since 1989, is they were right to believe that they couldn't handle the problem on their own. You know, that they weren't going to be able to just say there's a red line, or they weren't going to be able to just conjure up a coalition because they said so, that they were actually going to have to do the hard work of getting a coalition together. So I think that the Biden administration recognized that something terrible was going to happen, and they scratched their way towards coming.
You watched the video too?
Response to it. I think that's all in their favor. And I think the Biden administration reacted. They reacted quickly, also in terms of the concepts that they were using. You know, it was no longer about how Russia was a failed democratic project or Putin was someone we could do business with. It was more about just actually taking the data as it was on the ground and trying to respond to it. I think they did that pretty well.
I mean, when you look at it from a Western perspective, almost from everybody except for Russia, or at least Vladimir Putin's perspective, it seems so illogical, the war. It seems so hard to understand why they would isolate, why the threats against them wouldn't work, why he would risk so much, maybe even his life, on this invasion. And had Putin changed? Did we just never understand him, and it had always been there? How do you explain that?
I think it's all the above. I mean, first of all, Ukraine changed. Ukraine between 2014 and 2022 saw a generational change in leadership, where a lot of talented and interesting people actually came to power. Ukraine changed in the sense that 2014, the Maidan, the First War, opened up a period of cooperation in civil society and human networks, which were going to prove to be very important in the 2022 war. I think that we and the Russians were alike in the sense that we didn't really understand how much Ukraine had changed and how much Ukraine would be an agent in this story of a war. How much this was not going to be a story of Russia humiliating America by invading Ukraine, how this was going to be a story of Russia humiliating itself because Ukrainians were going to fight back and win. Number two, I think we always misunderstood Putin. I think we always misunderstood him in the sense that we misunderstood Russia as a kind of failed transition to democracy. Russia wasn't that. Russia was an alternative to democracy, which pretended to be a democracy, and which functioned in its foreign policy by trying to destroy the democracies which were more real than it was. But that said, Putin also changed over time. The cynicism gave way also to a certain mysticism, a certain idea about Russia's mission and his personal mission and how he would be remembered after he died. That did change. And if one follows his rhetoric in the last 10 years, it's clear that he's reaching a point where he actually believes that Russia and Ukraine are one country, and that this means that Ukraine will collapse when he invades, but it also means that this is his opportunity to somehow make history right again, which is a kind of thinking which it's understandable that democratically elected leaders are not going to really understand.
Does Vladimir Putin understand Joe Biden? Does he understand what the American response will be?
This is an absolute fucking cope that Trump would somehow support Ukraine. It's a cope. Stop.
Does he also have an inability to understand what will happen if he invades Ukraine?
I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding on the Russian side, on Putin's side, of people who are used to living in democracies. Because in some ways, he's right. We are slow, we're complicated. The various forces inside our countries end up canceling each other out. But that doesn't mean that there aren't points where a fundamental sense of decency is involved. And I think not just in American public opinion, but in European public opinion, invading Ukraine crossed that line. It crossed that line for a lot of people. And here you can take President Biden as a person, like other Americans or like others who just thought totally invading a country with the aim of wiping it out of existence crosses a line which is not a political line, but was some kind of line of human decency. And I think it is a misunderstanding that Putin has about us that we are just as cynical as he. I think that is a misunderstanding. I think it's a fundamental misunderstanding.
When he says he's a murderous dictator, he's a war criminal, he should be gone. I mean, is this a real breaking point or a real turning point certainly in these presidents we've seen from George W. Bush, even before, up till now, how profound is that a break when Biden says that?
I think it's kind of refreshing for us, honestly, to be using this language which is more straightforward.
I mean, let's be honest here. America just left fucking Afghanistan, and nobody. Wait, was it Afghanistan, right? And nobody gave a fuck. They lost to fucking ISIS in like fucking 3 days or some shit, unironically. So it is kind of true. Like, why America would, Taliban's, whatever, why America would support a country that wouldn't want to fight, right? It's extremely important. And we had to show that, and we did. So that's based.
I think it's important for Americans to be using a language which is more general and which is not of our own making, because in our language, there was 89 and 91 and democracy, and it was inevitable, and then maybe some people were going astray. But to flat out say that what's happening in Ukraine is genocide, which it is to get out of our story of what's been happening in the last 30 years and to bring in some more fundamental concepts, which I think Biden has been doing. And I think what that involves fundamentally is recognizing our own mistakes, that maybe more dramatic things have been happening that we have not quite been able to look at. And when we use the more dramatic language, like war criminal, for example, we're recognizing our own mistakes. It doesn't really matter for Russia, the way that people think it matters for Russia, because the Putin regime is always saying that we say things like this. I mean, so when we actually do, they don't actually cover it. So we assume that for example, when Biden said that Putin had to go, that would have huge ripples in the Russian media. And I'm here to tell you that it didn't. I was following the Russian media after that. If anything, they tried to just kind of tuck it away on the side because it was a bit embarrassing. It's much better for them to be in control of the story than it is for an American president to actually come out and say these things.
How dangerous is this moment? How dangerous is it for Putin? How dangerous is he?
Well, I think he's trapped in the conventional war that he's fighting. So I think the chief danger of this war, we should remember, is for the Ukrainians who are under Russian occupation. The civilian deaths of Ukraine, I think, are the worst thing about this war, and will likely remain the worst thing about this war. I think he's in a conventional war which he's going to lose, and I think the conventional war that he's going to lose will likely have political.
Hey, the deaths of our soldiers are also a fucking horrible thing, because many of them are just civilians that took up arms to fight because there's no other option.
Ripples already has had for some time, political ripples inside the Russian Federation, and it may lead to his losing power. I think it's pretty important for us not to get too emotionally involved, as we have in the past with individual Russian leaders. You know, we wanted Gorbachev to say, we wanted Yeltsin to say, you know, we don't like Putin, but even so, we're discomfited by the idea that Putin won't be in power. They always fall from power. Dictators always fall from power. That it always happens, and when it happens, it's not something we should feel guilty or ashamed about. We should just be ready for it and be preparing our policy for the next person. So obviously, the situation is very dangerous for Putin, and poetically, you know, he's created the situation which could bring him down, which didn't have to happen, by mobilizing 1 million Russian soldiers to go fight a war which was utterly pointless, in which many of them are going to die. He's created the situation where he could fall. He's gone back to a place like 1917, you know, where a Russian government is fighting a war it probably shouldn't have been fighting. He's going back to like the 1560s and Ivan the Terrible, like fighting a war he shouldn't have fought and creating domestic consequences which he may not be able to deal with. That's all on him, and I think it's very important for the United States to recognize that these things have their own logic, and we should really do our very best to try to deter nuclear weapon use. We should do our very best to try to make this war in Ukraine end as quickly as possible, which means, to be clear, the Ukrainians winning it as quickly as possible, because that's the only way it can end. And how things turn out in Russia, we shouldn't be talking about who we want to rule Russia. That's not our business. We shouldn't be talking about whether Russia should fall apart. That's not our business. If the Russians start a war, let them figure out what happens next.
Fuck 'em, dude.
Don't talk too much about it. Just make sure that the right country wins the war, and then, you know, the rest is up to the Russians themselves.
Legalize nuclear bombs.
True. Damn, dude. That's a good interview. Smart dude. That's a smart man. True. Nukes are now legal. I shoved a nuke up my pussy. Yeah, it was a good interview. Thanks for linking that. Appreciate that, man. That's... Okay, let me take a look. General of the Army of Ukraine, Malomouj, says that Armed Forces of Ukraine eliminated 70 to 80% of all elite troops of the Russian Federation. That's pretty cool. What's this? Fucking... I wish the video would continue. That would have been such a perfect fucking drop, dude. Oh well. Snyder's a cool dude for sure, for sure. Okay, let's take a look. Want to see a cringe Russian commercial? This is kind of protector you want it to be? Go to Ukraine, die for nothing. This is the path you wanted to choose? Why choose a path when you can just choose a much shorter path? Oh man. Bro, you gotta remember, these are like real people that you know, filmed this and they were actors in this. Do we need to show pictures of real Russian military? Well, most of the pictures I obviously can't show you. It's TOS. They're fucking dead in the fucking ground. Bro, we've seen videos of pigs eating dead Russian corpses. We've seen videos of chickens, cats, dogs. That's your place. In the fucking ground, 6 feet over, on top. Was attack on Kiev today? Holy shit. Somebody's saying rocket. So in Dnipro there was Shaheds, but the air target was identified in the sky of Kiev region. The air defenses are ready. What if we would actually like shoot down the fucking UFO? What if UFO would unironically visit our country, but we would think it's a Russian missile and we'd fucking shoot it down? Well, whatever it was, it's gone. Sheesh, man. Sheesh. Yeah, it does look like a meteorite, actually. Is this ours or no? Say Palyanica. That's funny. Супутник прикол. Oh shit, we actually recovered it. Look. We recovered an object. Okay. Martian Lend-Lease, dude. Yeah, of course. The memes are keep going, man. Why are you here? Why are you here? You wanna call your family? Bruh. There's a report from air defenses. They destroyed one UFO. Damn, bro. Oh, shit. Oh, shit. Girkikus is making a video now. Oh, shit. Who's he gonna say? What is he gonna say this time? It says New Marcia. I'll post these memes, I'll post this on my channel on Telegram. Oh. Okay, that was funny. How to join? Type ! Telegram. Zelensky was in Avdiivka yesterday, 4 kilometers from the front line, in a semi-encirclement, says OSINT researchers. To be precise, 3,908 meters to the geolocated positions of the invaders. Damn, bro. Дорогие марсиане. Anyway. That's interesting. Нам потрібні лазери. Захисні щити протиповітряної оборони. I'm saying in Ukrainian, I'm just making a joke. I'm saying like, dear Martians, we need lasers, energy shields. You need to supply it. Okay. All right, boys, let's not waste more time. Let's continue The Last of Us, right? You excited? Excited, guys? The gaming boys, welcome. Grabbing the controller. Gaming.
Gaming.
All right. Okay, so quick update. We went to this island where the wild people live, and we're gonna get them. We're gonna get them. But I need to update my title and shit. Give me a second. We're gaming now, huh? Sure, give me a second. I have to do this on 3 fucking different platforms. There must be a better way to do this. And here, of course. Oof, okay. She uses it to connect with the earth, you know? Like them avatars. Hoppa. Yeah, let me read this, let me read this letter over his fucking dead, nasty, just nasty, nasty body. Scott and I made the landfall on the eastern coast around 03 hours. Intel from prisoners proved to be useful for once. Okay, no direct resistance, looking for high ground to get our bearings. Biggest concentration of structures in on the southern side. I don't care. Return to landing spot to find our boat scuttled in the ocean destroyed. They know we're here. Need to find another way out this island.
Why are you helping us? Lev asked me the same thing. I guess you don't deserve this. But also, I needed to. I had to.
Alcohol in the side door, base driver.
Whoa. Is that your village?
No, that's Haven. Ours is further inland. Don't linger. They might see you.
What the fuck? That's a fucking huge fucking village. What the fuck? That's like a lot of them, huh?
Oh no. What is that?
It's our warning signal. Your people are here. The whole island is on alert now. We need to hurry.
God damn it, Isaac.
We'll cut through the logging camp.
How many people live here?
That's a good point. You guys follow me.
How many
I
soldiers?
stream on different platforms wherever you're watching.
What are the other half gonna do?
Just follow, you know? Because I stream every day. Swear to God.
Most will fight.
Am I missing like a lot of loot? Or I'm constantly like thinking about that? Huh? Give me the loot. Okay. Nobody here? Loot everything. Oh my god. They're hunting and shit? Moses. Distribute the venison as follows. Tenderloin rump, Elder Duncan, blah blah blah. Also, August requested the skin. He promised to have Ezra forge new boning knives for us in return. Okay, whatever. They have bullets here? Arrows. Those remains of a satellite? Yeah, that's what's gonna happen, Elon Musk, if you're gonna fuck around on Twitter too much. Okay? You'll fucking watch out. Do we need this? What else do we need? Okay, I'll be careful.
Where
Don't
is
get
everyone?
hit.
I'll fight it.
Bro, who just keeps like one bullet? Oh, it's a bullet? I'll just, you know, keep it here. Who took my one bullet?
May her light guide us through the storm. When you're lost in the darkness, look for the light.
Oh my gosh, she's getting converted.
Something my dad used to say.
Oh. You're dead, Dad? My trusty bullet. Ooh, is there something on top? Can I jump over there? Probably not.
We need to climb up there.
Are people talking, or is it in my head?
Get down.
Get them to the shelter! Go!
They're Amish.
This is bad.
Actually, when you think about it.
How do we get through this? The gate'll be locked.
Billy Amish.
The lumber mill. The big building on the right with the torches.
That gets us out of here?
Yeah, we can cut through it.
Perfect. Come on.
No, don't.
Close the gate! Seal off the camp!
Oh yeah? Of course, they leave some people in because what? Yeah, you know, our island gets attacked, all the civilians go into the direction of attack, everyone else who's capable to fight, just stay here. Lol.
Only through fear we find our true strength.
Shut the
I'm
fuck
not
up.
ready. What?
Shh, go to sleep. What do you mean? You killed her. No, I put her to sleep. The arrow broke? Bro, I hit her in the fucking head. Oh, I see somebody there. Are you fucking for real?
Get to the lumber mill!
I got. What can I say?
Going to be a long night. Remember, only through fear can we find our true strength. I'm not ready. For the sake of your king and your land, you will be.
Where is she? No. She saw her?
Wolf in our village!
Da bля! You for real?
Get to
Stop the
lumber
cap!
mill! You'll pay for this, Yara! To the left! Bo! See them?
What's this? Okay. Oh, I see you.
Lost. Start the hunt.
Piece of fucking shit. Yo, stupid bird!
Running!
Come on!
Yo, I caught it in the air, dude! Oh my god, I fucking shot him in the head. What the fuck? Is he gonna peek? Piece of fucking shit. Who is running? Stop running. No, I don't. Fucker. Get the fuck out of my way. Ah, that was so bad.
Rachel, say anything? Nothing here.
No! Oh my god. Where? He's there, right? Are you gonna peek? Peek. What?
Get to the lumber mill!
You'll pay for this, you! Don't let her escape!
They were there.
Get to the lumber mill!
Shut up. Wasn't there a break or something here?
Careful, over there.
Where?
No!
I think that's it. Yeah.
That was close.
You all right? Just a little winded.
Why are you winded? What the fuck? Alright, fuck. Fuck, man. Oppa. Coins. Alright, let's clear this place out. Nothing in this. I can't make a med kit. Oh, that sucks. I'm what? What does that mean? I know that's a stat in Dark Souls or something like that. Clairvoyance. Whoa, pillies. Isn't that old world? Why the fuck you collecting it? From all the supervising? Yeah. Oh, he can predict the future, true. Oh, picked up something good. Some alcohol. Nice jump. Can I jump here? Nope. Hammer has 4 stacks. Wait a second. Oh, I just need scissors. Actually, axe would have been better. Any tips for job interviews? Yeah, for sure. Oh. Give me a second. Okay, let me go grab the axe back. Okay. The tips for a job interview. Well, first of all,
Come on, this way.
don't put anything on your resume that you're not ready to talk about. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be an expert in that field, but don't put anything that you don't know what to say about, right? That's the first advice. Because you can expect a question on your resume, like about anything that it's there. And when somebody asks you for something that you didn't do on your resume, it's okay to say that you didn't do it. If you think that you lack some skills for the position, come up with some skills, right? Ask ChatGPT to write a resume for you or whatever. But whatever is in your resume, you gotta be able to properly reply. Even if it's true information, like let's say you worked with some specific thing, you need to be able to, even if you did work with it, you have to be able to answer a couple of questions about it, right? But it also depends. It all depends on like what is the position. Is that like a senior position or you know, junior or not or whatever. So and that will depend on what you put in the resume. So if it's like a junior position, people gonna have lower expectations, but they will focus more on like personal qualities. And junior engineer, like software engineer or just regular engineer. I think for a junior, it's important to show that you're like very motivated. People are not gonna expect from you like expert knowledge, obviously. So you gotta say that you're like very responsible, very professional. You're extremely motivated to work. Besides that, you gotta show that you're motivated by saying stuff like, oh, I like read up on the newest things in the mechanical engineering. I watch like, you know, YouTube videos to, or like not YouTube videos, but like presentations, call it like that. I watch like online presentations about new technologies or brushing up on the existing knowledge. I read like books about that shit or whatever the fuck, you know. So that's gonna be important too. Yeah. You can say that as a plus, right? Like you, but don't say it like, oh, I visited some factories because I had to. But say it like present it in a different option, saying like, I had the opportunity to visit some factories and I took it and I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot of new things. Saw how like stuff is being engineered, manufactured, whatever the fuck. You know, just some.
Yara, we need to move.
And be like excited to talk about it. Also, ask a lot about the job too. Even if you. So
what are you doing?
Another recommendation is. What I do is, if I'm really interested in the position, I go to like their website and I research and I really go deep into the product. So when they're gonna be talking about the product, I may like interject a little bit and say, oh yeah, just like you do this thing, and they're like, yeah, we do that. You know, it's very impressive when you. So whatever the fucking equivalent for your job would that be, that's also a good like plus, because it means that you're interested in getting that job. And also ask a lot of questions too, but not like stupid questions, but maybe even questions you have the answer for, but you think that like really important for your position. It shows that you're like serious and you're interested.
This is a gift. They're on our territory now. Let's show them.
They saw me?
See anything?
put you down! Let him go! Try!
Dude! I didn't have bullets in that fucking gun.
Get down.
This is a gift. They're on our territory now. Let's show them what they deserve. Through her love, we will survive this.
They just run?
Wolf! There's a wolf here!
Yara!
I don't know why I did that. I thought it was funny. I was wondering what would happen if they're doing that animation.
This is a gift. They're on our territory now. Show them what they deserve. Through her.
Are you serious right now?
Got another wolf!
Chill with that, Jesus. It's through an agency? Well, still, you know, you can ask agency the questions to, like, prepare. Oh, also ask about, like, what are they gonna... If it's technical interview, don't be shy to ask what are they gonna ask about. They should be able to... A normal company usually, upon request, they will kind of provide an outline for you of the questions that they're gonna have, so you could prepare for it.
Get your supplies and let's go.
Okay.
That's unlucky. Benjamin, all is well. Jared Hunting Brigade set off for Wolflands, no eyes, blah blah blah. Peter, all is well. Seraphied Symbol, all is well. The Thomas, the rain tonight is strong visibility for wolves, the brigade. Okay, whatever.
Ready?
Yeah.
Not really. Well, increase maximum health, grasp shift. What should I? Oh, that's a no-brainer. Apples. Well, we gotta check that fucking shit, dude. Come on. Yo, the fuck is this cringe? Disrespect. My prophet, may you hear my words. Moira was a strong... She was a loyal. She witnessed her husband Henry and their patrol get slaughtered by wolves. Then she wakes up screaming. Sucks to be you.
Please protect him.
Stop with this fucking cringe shit. Cringe.